rolled over the hour. Okay, so here we are back at what is this? Day 7, day 6, day 7, Saturday. This is the day. This is the day at conventions I usually spend sitting in the hotel room trying to work out how many more bags I've got to buy from Walmart so I can get all the stuff from the silent auction home. So yeah, that's worked out a bit better. This. Well, I think we've got our first presenter here for the day. We've got another full packed day, so I hope everyone's going to stick around. I'll hand it over to Speed, and he can take it from here.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Speed, the bottom helix. Our next presenter has a science degree in electrical engineering. He also holds 11 national and international patents in the telecommunications industry. Having recently retired from a 22-year career as the Director of Network Technologies at AT&T Labs, he continues to develop and offer innovative RFID, NFC, as near-field communications. RFID should be radio frequency identification, technical solutions to streamline inventory management, school security, and various other industries. To give his brain a rest, he enjoys officiating Texas high school football, riding his Harley, and model railroading. We welcome Mr. Colton Brown.
All right. Thanks a lot, Speed. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started today just talking a little bit about RFID solutions and basically how we can use RFID in model railroading operations specifically. So some of the things that we are going to go over is we're going to talk about what is RFID, how RFID works, some of the frequencies and types of tags that we're using for it, and then getting started with Traxx, which is a solution, an application for operations using it, and then the JMRI integration, and then we'll do some questions and answers, and we'll do a real brief live demo back in the shop. So anyway, with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. So first of all, what is radio frequency identification? It's a technology that uses radio waves to transmit for detection and identification of devices, components, and a number of different things that you would use it for. There's going to be many applications in the RFID technology. You know, some of them you will find physical security applications, access management to get yourself in and out of locations. You use it for clothing items. You can use it for location identification. You track vehicles, pets, people, And of course, retail merchandising, you'll see it everywhere is scale 1-to-1 rail cars. You know, actually what they actually have on rail cars. This is tag that you will see, and it will be on both sides of it. And so this is what we kind of took our application and built it upon, is having a tag on a rail car and a locomotive, and then being able to have readers on the other side of it, you know, to be able to read that tag and understand what the contents are inside the thing for RFID. One is going to be the RFID, the tag itself. The other is you can have a computer that can do a lot of the computing and be able to bring out a lot of the information that that tag has in it. And first of all, you have your tag, and it has an antenna, rectifier, controller, memory, transponder capability, all in a little passive tag. The tag has it's not connected to anything. And the reader actually is going to be the electronic device, and it will be a transmitter, receiver, and it's actually going to transmit some radio waves over to the microcontroller in that reader. From that microcontroller, we can connect that to a computer or some type of embedded compute system, and we'll be able to read that information that we get off of that tag. So some of the RFID frequencies and types of tags that are used out there. So first of all, there's different types of frequencies. You got your low frequency, high frequency, ultra high frequency, and these are different frequency ranges that these tags come in. So some of the things that you see in model railroading is a lot before, previously, was from the 125 kilohertz range. And at that 125 kilohertz range, the distance, and this is all a reference distance when we say less than 1 foot, because everything is going to be based on the size of the tag and the size of the reader. But the reference distance is less than 1 foot. And what we're using it for here is just so you can use it, referencing it to the different frequencies of tags and the distance that they have. So the 125 kilohertz distance is less than 1 foot that you can read. And when we actually go to our scale sizes, it's going to be a lot less than that. 13.56 megahertz is what we're using right now in our tags and readers, and that you can see as reference to the 125 kilohertz. It gives you a little bit further distance, but then still in our scale capabilities, that looks like about 5 to 6 millimeters. All right, with that, we're gonna go ahead and get started with actually how we take RFID and how we use it for model railroading. And so first here in our platform, you'll see that there is a tag that we put on the bottom of the trucks, or it could go at the lowest point of the bottom of the car. And in this case, it's just a peel off 8 millimeter tag that will stick right on the trucks. Peel it off, stick it right on the trucks. And as you roll that tag over the reader that is placed right underneath the track, it's going to take the information that that reader has stored on it, and it's going to take it to the 8266. And the 8266 is going to take that information by Wi-Fi and take it to a located, the Raspberry Pi is going to be co-located to the home router. And from that home router, you can get to our cloud, which is the Traxx platform, and be able to view that off of your laptop, your cell phone, your computer, or any device that you have connected to the internet through the router. All of our Wi-Fi modules that would be on the layout is going to be communicating to the point for all of the Wi-Fi modules that are going to be on the layout. And two, it's going to be used as a local compute point for our JMRI application. The readers that sizes. And for these sizes, you got the 8mm size you're going to use for N scale, HO scale, S scale. It has some, it has capabilities to also be used against metal surfaces, and in a lot of cases it won't read. So we have a special tag, a metal tag, that would be used for any type of database. And this kind of allows us to easily associate the tags with the that you would do with it. The readers can come in various form factors, and that's going to depend on what scale and things such as that. So it depends on what scale you have, depending upon what type of reader you're going to have. That Wi-Fi and the Wi-Fi modules are all pre-configured. So the only thing that the end user is going to have to really do is just take out the Raspberry Pi and connect it to the router, and everything is up in operation automatically. The Wi-Fi modules will automatically attach to the Raspberry Pi access point. Our application is part hosted in an environment that can be accessed from any location that has an internet-enabled device there. If there is no internet access, you can still use our application because you have a local host in the Raspberry Pi itself. So what we have access to the internet for is to get any downloads, updates, any new configurations and things such as that. Once a customer has the Traxx hardware, they'll also get a username and password assigned to them that gives them access to the software so they can use that application to interact with the layout. All right, so installing the gateway. So first, the thing this is the only thing that you have to do outside of the physical world to the home router, and that's it. The Raspberry Pi will come up, and then as the Raspberry Pi comes up, as you connect any of the Wi-Fi modules, they will automatically be associated to the Raspberry Pi. RF reader and your Wi-Fi module connected, there's different ways that you can actually scan the tags into your system and associate with those with the card that you're going to assign them to. First of all, we just have a basic cable that is connected to the Wi-Fi module itself with a micro USB plug connected to the Wi-Fi module, and then you got a set of wires that are going to the reader, and the reader will then just put one of the tags up against that reader, and it will go ahead and read the tag, and then you can plug in any of the information that's associated with the card to that tag. We have also a little battery pack that would attach to this. So if you don't have a computer that's supplying 5 volts through a USB cable, you will just have a little 5-volt battery that is attachable to a USB cable, and then it connects also to the Wi-Fi module and supplies power to both the Wi-Fi module and the reader. And then we have the little scenario here that you have, we just call. And then you can also install it on the layout, underneath the track, as you see here. And we put over the reader here. And if you're going to put ballast over that, and then as you roll the car over the reader, it will read that information of the car. Here's way that you're using the 8 and 25 millimeter tags. And again, as we explained earlier, you can just peel it off and put it at the lowest point on the rail car itself. Here, we put it on the trucks, and then you could also, put it over here off to the side. It will still read just as well. And with the locomotives, you can put them right on. You can use a larger tag or the small tag. You can, this one, in this scenario, we're using 25 millimeter tags. And 5 millimeter tag, that's right underneath the gas tank of the locomotive. And then if you want on the car here, when the Wi-Fi module is installed along, that the tag can get associated with the rail car. And this is the web view of the train tracks web view. And as you go and say, in this example, we're going to add these into our inventory, okay? So there's a couple of different ways to add this into the inventory. In this specific case, we're going to add this in the come to this page, you can hit view, and you will be able to add a car into your inventory. This is just showing your activity as it goes over the reader. As it goes over the reader in the train tracks view, it's just going to show you the car information, the name of the car, the box car, the date and time that it's rolled over it. And you can also have an image of the location that it has rolled over and the name of the location that it has been placed. And you can also have the picture of the car itself. And again, you would just take a picture of that car, upload it into the system, and that picture will be there, and it would be associated with a specific tag. And you will see that pop up as the car goes over the reader. In this specific case, you see the car has gone over multiple readers here. Well, one reader and multiple readers, and you can see it at the different locations that it stopped. Here is your web view of your inventory. And this, you will just hit your inventory. This has a pull down menu when you hit views. And you will go ahead and set that information up. In this case, it's just the inventory. And on your inventory, you're just individually, singularly, just plugging in one car, a car information, the road name, the number, and everything like that. And then you can pop up your car from the pull down menu from uploading it into the system here and associate that car with the name and the information, the text information. And just like the information that you would put into a car, you would associate the information of the location. Like in this example, we have a Dawson's Flat Car Depot, and we've associated that information with the tag itself. And so once we've associated with the tag, and then you can actually put a picture that you've actually uploaded into the system that would also associate with the location that you set up for that reader. And here is just a view of all of your tags that you would have in your system. And this is just a good example of the raw data that the tag that you see on the tag. The raw data that you'll see on the tag is just this information right here. This is the type of tag it is. This is the tag key. And here you got your tag UID. And here is the data that's associated with the tag. So each tag has its own data stream that you'll see here in hex. And so there's just millions and millions and trillions of numbers that these tags are associated with. And so this tag number here, this is what you see on the tag. And that's all the information that you see on the tag itself. The software is going to allow you to associate this number here to your car information that you've plugged in from your inventory piece of it. So what the reader sees is car information, and that's how it's going to pop up all of the information about your car. Here you've also seen the tags that you've already assigned to a car. It'll, in this case, it's just giving you the name of that car, specific car, and the tag number. One of the things when we do and when we put them in the database on our end here is we'll assign that tag to a number. And it's just a different variable number. It's all increment. You would associate the number of that tag here to the car that you're going to put into the system. One by one, if you have your cars already set up in a spreadsheet, you can actually upload them into the system. And once you've uploaded your spreadsheet into the system, it's actually going to take all of your cars and put them on the application. And now, rather than having to go through and type all of the individual car information in, you will have a pop-down menu once you go to your inventory. It'll be a pop-down menu, and once you've scanned the tag, you go to your menu, and it will show all of the cars that you have on that spreadsheet. You'll just point and click any specific car, and you automatically associate it with that tag. That's how easy it is for the tag and car association. Here is an export also. So we have the export capability. If you want to create put all your inventory on a spreadsheet, we can export that spreadsheet to you, and then you can start populating that spreadsheet with all the information that you want to put on about that car. As far as the cost of it, you can put anything in there. You could put the cost of it, you could put the date you bought it, you could put, the material it carries, you could put, of course, the road name, road number. So all of the information that you want to put in there, you can put in there. And all of the information that you want viewed, you don't have to view all of that information. You will just view specific information as it rolls over the reader. So some of the local device management that we have, and that kind of gets into the JMRI integration piece of it. So one of the things that we did with JMRI, because we had this real nice application and it fits very well in being able to track your stuff on a layout, see where it is, read it as it's going into a specific location, doing all of that. Now, one of the key things is the operations piece. So we had two options of going down the operations piece. We could use what's already out there, which JMRI has a very nice operations program, and there are some other ones out there, or we could develop our own. But what we decided to do on this, based with the JMRI integration, and with the JMRI integration, we first had to get the capability to get our hooks into JMRI, and we've worked with JMRI, some of their developers, to make that happen, and system, for their sensors and their reporters for real-time updates. And so we're able to take that information, example, whatever we had in the database for the cars that you had put in train tracks, it's going to migrate over into JMRI also. And so when we do our sync for JMRI, motives, the sensors, and the tags, and it's going to kind of show all of this information in a little GUI that we built with JMRI, with the JMRI information, I should say. So this is how it looks. This is the little GUI that we kind of built for JMRI for us to work with JMRI. And it just basically, this is just gives you, you know, the update, the latest updates that we have. And it tells you the JMRI version that you have. You have a little connect. This gives you the ability to just to put your phone up to this device on your camera, and it will kind of get you on the same network as the JMRI here. And we have update releases, we have application settings here. And then we move on. This is how the train activity is going to look in JMRI at this point. So this is what you have out of the Raspberry Pi. So every time that you roll over a point, the reader on the track, it's going to give you all of that information on that car. This particular one is Union Pacific 9189. It tells you the time that it's rolled over that. It tells you here it was in the east yard on track 2. It said it left loaded on the east yard track 2, and its destination was east yard track. Its destination in this case was east yard track 2. So it left loaded, went to its destination, dropped off at its destination, and now it turns green. When it's dropped off at its destination, it will turn green. Again, it'll show you the car information, and it'll show you the destination that that car was dropped off at. Here, it also has a location that it should have been dropped off. You can actually go and pull up the information on that car. Gives you all the information of that car and where where that car was at its last location. Gives you the JMRI location, and it also will give you the train tracks location of where it was detected, where it was last detected. Train tracks to JMRI. So all of the information that we have in the car information, the readers, the tags, and everything like that, we're syncing that over with JMRI over here, and you'll see it'll have gateways, the readers, the tags, and then it would be associated with sensors, reporters, cars, engines, and locations with JMRI. So we sync those two together, and that's how we're able to get this end result that we have here. And this is another screen that you have the ability to look at. This is actually all the built trains that you would have. In our JMRI Train Auditor, it shows you all of the built trains. It'll show you, you know, what the lead engine is, the time it departs, where it terminates, you know, all of the information of that engine. And then it'll show you also on the right side here, it'll show you all of the cars that's associated with that train. So here you'll have all the trains listed and all the cars that are associated with the train. As that train or as that specific car makes it to its destination, in this view, it will actually check off with a green mark, a green check mark that it has made it to its destination. If you have the X there, it has not made it to its destination. This is kind of a key point on how we also be able to monitor and measure, it reading, maybe getting 2 reads, at a location. Say if you're pulling it in, you pull it out and you pull it in, it's going to read that it's at that, you're pulling it in and pulling it out at that location as the last location it was. But it's not going to check mark that. It's not going to show green that it's at its destination point until you got it to that point. Here's some of the operational links that you have also, the capability of using. And this gives you the capability of looking at the scan and place it right over the manifest. And this is right over on the computer that you have this set up on. Place it right over that, and then it will actually show you your manifest. It'll tell you where you take the cars to, where to drop it off on your cell phone. It'll do it on tablet, so whatever device, handheld device that you have, it can do it on that. And if you just like to do it, just want to print it out, it'll just print it out for you also. But it does give you the capabilities to put it on a, phone and a tablet. And here's the node information. This just kind of gives you all of the information of that node, which is the Wi-Fi module and the reader together. So it'll tell you how many reads that you had off of it. This is how you can actually update all of the readers on your layout. You can update all the readers on your layout wirelessly, just sending a signal through the Raspberry Pi, and it will update all the readers to the latest and greatest. Shows you your success rate of the reads of the Wi-Fi and reader modules, as we calling the nodes. And so again, it gives you, a lot of different capabilities in the software. And the software is very, very easy to use. So now we're going to go ahead and get to our live demo, and I'm actually going to show this working to a certain extent. All right, I am going to grab my phone here, and we are moved into our little test bed that we have set up here at Traxx. And this is kind of where we test everything. Here we have a monitor up here, and this monitor kind of shows you all of the cars and the information that we just took you through live at this point. Here, I'm going to go ahead and grab our little controller here, and hopefully I'm keeping things. Here we have, let's see if I can't see that here. I'm actually going to see if I can't turn this around. Let's see here. Is it going to give me that capability from this? Cars in this case. We're going to go ahead and turn this on. And what we're going to do is we're going to move our back. There's a reader right here also. This is how it looks. The readers are set up underneath there, just all located in one little place, connected to the Wi-Fi modules. But let me stop this for a second. We're going to switch this here.
Carlton, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
We're still sharing the live. Okay, here we go. You'll have to back up a little bit and start the demo from the front. They only saw your slides.
Oh, okay. They didn't hear any of that. All right. Yeah. Okay.
So just show it from the beginning. Okay. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Sorry, I guess I was talking while the slides were going. So basically here is this is our little test bed setup and everything. But this is a large monitor that we have set up that actually is going to show you all of the activity that we have as we run the cards over the readers here. And just what I showed you in the picture below. Show you a quick shot of how it looks underneath the board here, how it's set up. There goes your readers that are set up here. We have the reader set up to the little power supply, 12 to 5 volt power supply that's underneath there that actually powers the readers and the Wi-Fi modules. And then above here, you can see the readers on the track itself. And in this case, we have a reader right here at this point. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move these cars in here over the reader. And as we move it over the reader, you will see them pop up and over here, and they pop up pretty quick as they go over the reader with all of that information on it. So again here, and I hope I'm capturing this well. Again here, you see the cars that's gone in. You see the location code storage, OFC. Okay, it's on track 1. It's empty at this point in time. And it also shows the location of the industry itself. We are ready to take some questions. And I'm going back to the presentation now. All right.
First question, if you're ready.
Okay.
Can it, like for when you have a container on a well car?
Mm-hmm.
So can I read more tags at the same time?
Tag is associated with that specific car. If you have a load on it, if you have a load on that car, it's going to be associated with that car also. Now, if there is something to where you have a different load on it, like I'm just trying to understand an example of that. The only way that it will read a different load than what the program has associated with is if you put a tag on it, and if it is readable with the reader some sort of way. But as far as having to be able to read it, I'm going to associate the load separately. Then you would also be able to do it here by adding another tag.
So what happens if a load and a car has the tags on top of each other and it goes over the reader?
It has the load and tag on top of each other.
So I have a flat car with a tag, then I put a container on top of that with a tag. Can you read 2 tags at the same time?
No, it's not going to be able to read that container. Actually, if it is, the only thing that you can do for that is that particular case, that would need 2 tags. And what you would do for that container is you would put a small tag on that container, or whatever size tag you want on that container, and you would use the wand that we have that would tag that container as it comes in. And that will be able to give you the capability, the location.
Okay, there's some questions about the readers. Say that you have an 8-track yard. Do you put a reader on each of the spurs or only one at the throat?
It depends on how much you want to. It depends on the capability that you want to see. You can put it right at the throat, and you can say you can do virtual for all the other 8 tracks at that point, and say, well, the car is going to be in any one of those 8 tracks, right? Or you could put it on each leg. And if you put it on each leg, then it will have it narrowed down to the specific track that you have it on. And again, it just depends on how you want to set that up. You can set it up on each leg, or...
How reliable is the reading process for N-scale use?
About 90. Use it a lot for N-scale. Also, the 8mm tags work very well on the cars for N-scale and the locomotives for N-scale. And then we have 2 types of readers that you can use for N-scale. We have a narrower one for some of the narrower, for the narrower track. And you can still use the HO ones if you want to, if you have the track that are spaced, far apart. So we have 2 scenarios that you'd be able to use for that. Still using the 8mm tag at a 99% rate of accuracy.
What is the maximum distance you can read a tag from? Can you read a tag from above or beside the car?
No, we're using it. The car has to be above the reader because the reader's got to be on the track, and we're saying anywhere, from about 5 millimeters to 8 millimeters range that you have on it. So, yeah. So there's two things. We just have a new load of software that if you want to speed over that tag, we've given you the capability to go greater than prototypical for you're going problem reading this tag at all. It takes about, just a little less than a second, for it to read the tag. And so it's at a normal prototypical speed going inside a yard, interchange, or anything like that. You should be able to read everything with no problem.
So you covered going too fast, but what if you're going too slow, meaning you're sitting the car or the
software, in our software to be able to take care of
this, but if you have it, a new roster be set up.
It will interface to the existing roster, whichever train.
Well, what will happen if I take my box of rolling stock to my friend's house that has the same system and I run my train over?
The picture of your car, but it will read the information on your car because they are in the database. Now, that is only if they have the Pi tied to our website, to where we are updating the Pi and updating it with all the latest and greatest information. So if you are networked and if you are in our cloud, in our service application, then it will read your friend as he takes his car over to your layout. It will read that car also.
Cool. So how do you install a reader under existing track?
Well, you have to take the track up. We've got a kind of a guide that shows you how to do that. But you'll take, a little section of the existing track up, and you would have to, and then you place the reader underneath that track.
Okay. Are there things that you guys know will make the readers misread or fail by having other devices close to it?
So one of the things that I say that if you can avoid, try not to have the readers completely next to each other in parallel with each other all the way across. Just offset them. You could offset them by an inch, and that'll work just fine. And then again, a metal bottom. If you have a metal bottom on a car, then you'd want to use our metal tags, the special tags that we have for that. But outside that, everything else we've tested has worked with not many issues whatsoever. Like the in the module that we had back there, we have magnets on. We have no problems with the magnet then right after you got your reader, or vice versa. So there's no issues with that. As long as you, again, you take your readers and you don't have them just side by side, you're going to be okay. If you just kind of have them a little offset with each other, you'd be good.
Okay, one more software question. Are you syncing?
It's syncing both of the sources. And then it does for the local capabilities. So example, as you saw us read that car, when it actually read that car, it was reading it from the local Raspberry Pi at your home.
Okay.
Or on your layout.
Someone already did their research and noticed that you don't show the subscription service on anywhere on your website. Could you?
It's well, what happens is the subscription service. We would give you a password and a username, and there's a login point. And once you, oh, we don't have the subscription service information in there. Is that what after about four to 5 months of just getting familiar with it before you even get charged the $5 a month for the subscription service.
And our very last question, is there any chance you can make the slide deck available so people could read the small font?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can download it.
At the time to share it with us. Yes, please.
So the famous wheel of chat is back again. So I fixed it after Gordy decided to destroy it last night.
There we go. You guys hear me?
Steam or diesel. So a studio reset, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
See you soon. Welcome back. We had a slight change in the schedule. Someone stepped on the wrong nail and ended up in the hospital, I guess. But here is Kevin Marks, our safety specialist, who will get us ready.
Down before it goes off.
Kevin Marks, our safety specialist, who will get us ready.
Down before it goes off.
Careful there. Yeah, you can never be too safe. You need your safety glasses, and you need a fire extinguisher just in case. So apparently that's becoming a running thing. So I'm going to give you during the week where I just talked about different types of solder properly and how you can build some track. And if you want to see more section and you can see some more videos, and if you have videos already on YouTube, is a basic, but we need to learn new skills on this. Sat down with me and I said, okay, I'm going to show you how to solder, and we're just going to go through it step by step. So that's kind of what we want to do today. I did a clinic on this back in April, and it was great to see some comments, and people have messaged me about soldering, whether you're soldering track or decoders or feeder wires. Everything, the principles are still the same, regardless of what you're soldering. And, the thing I can't stress enough is cleanliness. So we're going to cover how to clean everything today, and that should take care of a lot of problems. We'll talk about flux. We'll talk about the type of solder that you want to use. and why you want to use it. So we're going to walk you through each one of those steps. So before we get into that, let's just quick touch on some of the things you need around the workbench. You already saw safety glasses. These are a must. You don't want anything flying up in your face. You saw the fire extinguisher behind me over here, and then up above the fire extinguisher on my workbench. I'm doing this backwards, so bear with me. Right above my finger is a little desktop fan. You don't want to breathe in those solder fumes. You want to get those away from you while you're soldering. And that's important, especially if you're going to do it for any length of time. Other important things you need are flush cutter nippers. These are Irwin vice grips. I'm going to demonstrate code 125 rail today, and HO scale nippers don't work, so you need something a little more heavier. 400 grit sandpaper. This is for etching the rail and etching the ties. You can get this at hobby shops, at hardware stores from 3M, pretty easy to find. And then also another great thing to have is just like a flat needle file with ridges on the bottom as well, so you can kind of get in and clean up everything that you need. Another great thing for cleaning up any excess solder is just an X-Acto chisel blade. This is good for just getting in. If you do get some little globs on there, you can clean it up just fine. So those are just some basic soldering tools that you need. I also like using black nitrile gloves. And you kind of want to view soldering as if you're doing painting, where cleanliness is everything. And just, this is me personally, I like to build everything first. Building meaning cut, file, make sure everything is right, and then I'll come back later after break and I'll clean it all up, and then I'll solder it. So literally it's getting cleaned again minutes before it's soldering, so that way I know it's as clean as it can possibly get. So the other thing we should talk about too is soldering irons, where a lot of us have a Weller 40-watt iron at home for N scale, HO scale, for smaller codes like that. Those work great. And I would recommend getting, I'll do this over my black shirt so you can see it better, you know, just a real narrow cone tip. And if you find any electronics supply store, you can get these really easy. This is a Weller. It's an ST6 replacement head for or tip for your iron. So that works great. And you want to get in there really tight and focus that heat. But what I'm going to be using tonight is resistance iron, because we're doing O scale, and O scale rail is pretty big and you need a lot of heat really quick. And I like using my iron at 85 watts that we can dial in. So what we're going to do is resistance soldering. So if you've never seen that, I'll walk you through it. But I just want to state that if you're doing HO and N scale track using code 55, 70, 83, a 40-watt Weller iron is just fine. But for code 125 or code 148, like you know, for O scale, you need something with a little more power. So we're going to use that, and I'll kind of walk you through that, since that seems to be a mystery for a lot of people as well too. If you do a lot of Traxx soldering, it's worth the investment. Plan on spending around $400 to, you know, get a unit. I will tell you that it's money well spent, and everyone who has one, the first thing they always say is, I can't believe I went this long without it. So if you're going to do a lot of soldering, it's definitely a worthwhile investment. So you can get a couple different pieces with it. You've probably seen tweezers. I was doing some big stuff the other day and moved my tweezers out a little bit. So you can solder with this. This is great for doing brass parts on locomotives. But for track work, the thing that I really like to use is a single electrode iron, because the tip on it is a really narrow tip, and I can get that inside some tight track work. And it's that iron that, you know, just because we want to do fun things here at Fast Traxx, you know, I built a quad diamond. So that iron helped, you know, build this bad boy. Otherwise, I probably could not have done it. But the thing that I want to stress is, if you're new to soldering, or if you see, if you've done it for a while and you see the techniques I'm going to show you, is just practice. don't be scared. Soldering in metal is actually easier than working in plastic because anything in metal can be fixed. Just as an example, last weekend I started a new project. I was completely terrified, even after all these years of soldering, where I'm modifying some O-scale brass cars and I'm taking these ventilators off. So I torch soldered the roof on another car and actually filled in some of those pieces with a torch. And I was absolutely terrified because I've never done it before, and pulling apart a $400 brass car is a little unnerving. But I had a good friend, and through video, he walked me through it. And at the end of it, I kind of went, really? That's it? That was really easy. So I kind of want to take that and the proper stuff. So let's just talk about flux and solder for a little bit. Fast Traxx, we prefer using an acid-based flux, and we actually source it ourselves. Kester used to make it. I have some here that we used to sell, but you can get that on our website. Acid-based flux is a little more aggressive, and your joints will come out a little cleaner. The thing to remember is when you're done, you need to get that flux off of whatever you soldered. So either a wire brush or some Dawn dishwashing soap or some lacquer thinner, use what is appropriate for what you're soldering, but you want to clean that flux off so it doesn't corrode your joint later down the line. The other thing is having the right type of solder. So I will tell you that, if you have some old stuff in your toolbox that has been there for 15 or 20 years, start fresh, get some new solder. Not that the solder has gone bad, but a lot of the old school solder is this really thick stuff. And this is just a 60-40 alloy that I use when I torch solder. But at Fast Traxx, we sell this really thin solder. So when you see the two, heat quickly and you want to get your solder in and get off the joint fast, which we're going to demonstrate today. And this alone solder that we sell on our website as well. The other thing I want to address, and I've seen some people do this on some Facebook pages, is they tend to flood the entire tie with solder. There's no need to do any of that. That's just extra time. You're using extra solder. And what I'm going to show you today, you don't have to do that. So it'll be quick. It'll be easy. When you get rail, we sell micro engineering rail, and code 83 is back in stock. It was out for a few months, but we got in 10, so it's oily and it's oxidized. And I find when I clean that off beforehand, things tend to go a whole lot better and easier, and my joints turn out blade, or not carbon blade, the carbon wire wheel, and that is number 428. And you can find these at hardware stores, hobby shops, big box stores. They're easy to, you want to clean all surfaces of the glasses, come on. So that is extremely important when you're using these wire wheels, because these little bristles here have a tendency to go everywhere, and you don't want them flying up into your face. The other thing I would recommend too is wear closed-toed shoes while you're wire wheeling, because those, if you're wearing sandals, and I had this happen last week, those little wire pieces tend to go everywhere and get lodged in the bottom of your foot. And of course, that happens as you're walking out the door. You don't want that to happen. So also, just like painting, once you start touching surfaces, the oils from your finger grip, heavy duty gloves, and you can still use your smartphone with these gloves, which is nice. And then they have a little grip on the bottom as well too. So you want to keep those oils off of your fingers, and you want those joints to be as clean as possible. So let's just get these gloves on and kind of get suited up for some soldering. So the other little tool that I like that we're going to use next are these little tweezers with the little bent piece here in the front that's great for grabbing rail and ties and moving things around. And I'd recommend picking up some of these at things all set up, ready to go. So haven't actually done anything with it yet. So let me go back again. So what I want to say, what I really want to stress with soldering is you don't solder the thing that you need to solder first. Find some scraps that are similar materials and practice on those first and kind of perfect your technique. Every iron is different, your flux is different. So you want to do what works best for the equipment that you have. And the best thing to do is actually practice. When I was a little kid, my dad when he was teaching me how to solder, pounded roofing nails into a 2x4, and I had to clean them all off and put a perfect solder glob on each one of those and solder wire to it. And until I perfected that, he wouldn't let me touch anything else. And those methods still, you know, kind of hold true today. So we're going to practice just soldering some straight track in a fixture. Super easy, but I'm just going to walk you through everything and make sure that, you know, we cover all the bases. So if you have one of our turnout fixtures, one of the neat things that you can do with it is actually build some straight track in it. You don't have to build just turnouts. So you can, you know, kind of lay everything out like what I did. I've already wire wheeled the rail that I have, and it's nice and shiny, but we're going to hit it with some sandpaper before we actually start to solder. And I've got ties right here that I've cut out, and I'll show you what I do for that. So the first thing you want to do when you're starting is take your 400 grit sandpaper, and all you're going to do is just clean up the bottoms of the rail. Even though it's new, it doesn't mean it's solder ready. There's still some surface oxidation that happens. And then we're just going to place these ties right inside the fixture here. And we're just going to do a little practice session on soldering so we can run through it. And like I said, when we're done, we're actually going to do some soldering freehand. So if you don't have any of our fixtures, you can still, you know, you're going to do. And actually, I'm just going to take this one out. There's still little schmutz on here from the sandpaper, and we'll place that on there. So it's good to have a little board like this that, you know, you can do your filing and do your sanding on, so you don't mess up the workbench or the work surface that you have. So we'll keep this over here. Super, super clean. The other thing sanding does is it actually etches the ties and the base of the rail. Extremely strong and clean and flat joint to bite onto all the soldering. So let's get this repositioned here. So we're doing this live on an iPhone. So this is as close up as I can get. But the thing that I want to stress is just worry about technique here rather than seeing everything nice and tight. So now that the ties are in, because there are grooves where the rail goes, we know exactly where it's going to go. So we're going to take our flux. This is just a little mini micro applicator brush. We sell these on the website as well too, but you can find them at pretty much any house. The rail is, I'm a trolley modeler, so we don't have to gap ties, but on the ties that we sell, you need, but for the sake of the video, we're just going to do the side without the gaps. So we're just going to take some flux and like what we did on the side with ties is when you bench, take your tweezers, nothing is obstructing the rail, sit. We're going to take our flux again, and we're just going to do a little swipe of flux on each side of these. You don't need to do that. If you pre-tin your ties, you're actually adding material to the top of the ties, and your rail won't sit flat when you go back and solder it. And then you're going to have to put pressure to make sure you force that rail back down onto the tie. And then the ties that are next to that joint will be raised up a little bit. And all that's with solder before you do it. And I just have one more to do here. And we'll get that right in. And then I'll show you what we're going to do next, just to make the rail goes. And the solder is going to flow clean. I'm going to basically solder as if you were spray painting, where you want to be focused on your work that is right in front of you. You don't want to have to reach around and solder the other side of a joint if you can help it. I know when you're on the layout, sometimes you don't avoid. You've heard the term brought up to the proper temperature, and it's called a cold solder joint. And you can see a cold solder joint because they're cloudy. There's on everything. A lot of times that means the joint's not clean, and also the joint was not brought up to temperature. So when you solder, it's kind of like little welding, where you want to have the heat on one side, the material in the middle, and then the solder on the other side. And you want to heat the material so the material is actually melting the solder. That way you know the joint got up to proper temperature. And when that happens, the joint literally sucks in the solder and it's nice and clean. So if you find yourself doing soldering and things are just kind of bubbling up and it's not happening, really it's just join up in gobs of solder. It's not right. You won't get that. When the joint is heated properly, everything will flow and you get a nice clean bond. So because if your parts move while you solder, if the parts move and the joint is cooling, that will also create a cold solder joint because it wasn't at temperature. So when you see guys weld, everything is clamped into place. You kind of want to take that same approach when you solder. You want things to sit there and you don't want to be moving your work. So if you have any of our other like stock aids or point form tools, these are great little weights to use. They will act as a heat sink, so just don't have them too close to what you're soldering. If you don't have any of these tools from us, I would highly recommend getting some Machinist 123 blocks. I bought these off Amazon, and they're 1 inch this way, 2 inches this way, 3 inches this way, and you can use these for building buildings as well too, for nice 90-degree joints. So what we're going to do, and let's move the iron back down again, and this will go pretty quick, is we're just going to hold everything in place so things aren't going to move. And with resistant soldering, it's called resistant soldering because it's basically an electrical joint and you're interrupting, or an electrical circuit, and you're interrupting that circuit. So with a single electrode, we need to attach this little alligator clip because we're going to basically be completing the circuit. So the other thing I like to do when I solder is I like to hold it like this, and I like to swipe the solder across because now I'm controlling how much heat is going on that joint. Where if you put your solder straight on, a well-heated joint that's properly fluxed will suck up all the solder that you can give it. So I want a strong joint with using as little heat as possible. So I'm going to turn on my machine. Again, it's 85 watts, and we're using this American Beauty single electrode iron, and you're going to see that this thing makes extremely quick work. Underneath my desk, I have a foot pedal to turn the heat on. And what I'm going to do is basically just place the iron on one side, heat up the joint, and then I'm going to apply solder to the other side. And you'll see a little spark, you'll see a little smoke, and the joint is heating up really nice. And all I'm going to do is touch the solder to it just like that. I did 2 little swipes, and then we're going to do the other side here. We're just going to heat up that joint, and it goes very, very quickly, and just touch it just a little tiny bit, and that's it. I took the heat off the pedal. So let's get this up into the camera so you can see this joint right here, how nice and clean that it is with no solder globs. And it literally just took a second. So we're just going to go right down the line, and we are going to put the weight back on. Let's get this in the frame real quick. And we're just going to go and finish up this track right here. So my tip just popped out. So let's just slide that in. And that's just a little on the warm side. So we're just going to tighten the tip up, and there we go. Easy peasy. So now again, we're going to put the heat on one side, and we're going to put the solder on the other side. You saw that spark that just happened there. That's fine, hence the fire extinguisher. And we're just going to touch the solder on like that, and it flows underneath the joint, comes out the paper. And it's super, super easy. And you can just see how quickly we're going down the line here. So if you need to build a lot of track work, especially in larger scales, having one of these irons is a great option to have. But if you're doing N scale, HO scale, a regular 40-watt Weller iron is absolutely more than enough. So all we're doing is just going down the heats up. We're just hitting it with just a tiny little bit of solder. And the nice thing is when we get done, you won't even be able to see the solder joints on here. You know, so when the track gets painted, you won't even be able to tell that this track was even soldered. Straight, and there's just a little bit of a spark, and it's heating up quite nicely. And there we go. Easy. One little swipe of solder is all you need. You don't need a ton of solder. One more little swipe, and we're done. So that's how quickly we can go through the line and literally long as track freehand. I'm going to move the camera. A rail roller that, you know, once the rail is in here, it will bend the rail to the appropriate radius. I've already done that, and I kind of demonstrated that on another previous video. And then the other neat little thing we make are these 3-point track gauges. And this is a great complement to the NMRA track gauge because these can actually sit on the track while you do it. We call these trifecta track gauges, and they've got 3 machine points on the other side. And they're very precise and will hold your track in place. So let's move the camera back down again, and we're going to solder some track freehand without a fixture, but you still need track gauges regardless of what you do. So we need some more PC ties. So let's get the PC ties back over here. We're just going to do a quick clean. And sometimes I see people's track work years. You know, you wouldn't solder a dirty engine, or I'm sorry, you wouldn't paint a dirty engine, so you don't want to solder anything that is dirty. So we're just going to do a quick sand right here, some thumbprints. So we're going to make sure we get all of those off, just like what we're doing right now with the sandpaper. So we're also etching the bottom of the ties as well too. So now we're just going to do a quick sand on the bottom of the rail, and you want to make sure that you aren't torquing the rail while you do it, and you can see just all the stuff that comes off, and that's oxidation that is on the bottom of the rail. So we're just going to do a sand, and then we're going to hit the sides of the base of the rail with the sandpaper just to make sure that we got all of that off as well too. So we're just going to sand, and again, cleanliness is everything. If everything is clean and you've got a hot iron and you have some good flux, life is going to go extremely well. When you don't clean it, just like if you're painting a dirty model, you know, kind of lay things out a little bit. So we're just going to take, have drawn your center line or where you want the rail to go. But for the demo, I just want to show you how quick and easy it is. And you want to have your rail bent as best as you can. Just in the rail roller. And I want to do this so you can see it. And when you put rail through the rail roller, you always want to pull it through so you don't kink the rail. So that's looking a little bit pulling the rail through. And we should be pretty good. It's just a little tweak right in here. So once you put the track gauges on, and you can see just how easy it is to put it together. So you want to bend the rail as close to the radius as possible. I'm well caffeinated this morning, so my hands are just a little jittery at the moment. So basically, let's try that again, just like that. See how you can move the rail just like this. So we know our rail is engaged. We're going to put a truck on it, and you know, the truck, this is a tight 15-inch radius and no scale, and the truck is moving just fine. So now that we did that, we're just going to get things exactly where we want, just like this. Let's move the camera a little bit. I'm just going to do a quick mark just so I know where the ties go, because we're going to have to pull this apart and get some flux on it, but we can do it without taking the whole thing apart. So now we're going to get some flux on it, and I'm just going to lift things up a little bit, get some flux on the base of the tie, just like this. And then we're going to add some weight, kind of like what we did before. And we'll get it weighted down, and then we're going to come back with some more flux on the sides of the base of the rail. But again, I just want to show you how easy it is to get some track down, because I think we're all in a situation where you need a piece of track and either flex track isn't going to work, you can't bend it tight enough, everything starts popping off, and you need to put some track down on your own. So now that we have the flux down, I'm just going to throw a little bit of weight on each side right here. And now I'm going to go back just like what we did with the track and the fixture, and I'm just going to put a little bit of flux on each side, because you want the solder to flow from one side to the other side, just like what we're doing here. And one of the great things about doing this live is, you know, there's no post-production, there's no editing. You are actually, and you're seeing me do all the steps right here. So now that we have flux on everything, we'll close that up, move that out of the way, and then we're just going to go back, and I'm just going to put a little piece of rail underneath here to support it. We're going to go back and we're going to solder what we just did. I'm going to add another track gauge down on this side. Make sure that that moves just like what you're seeing right there. And now we can come back, and let me grab my solder, and we're going to do the exact same thing as what we did before. So let's get in here a little bit, and I'm just going to touch the side of the rail with my iron hooked up, because it doesn't have the fixture to act as a heat sink, and that's looking really good. So underneath of the rail, I'm not heating up the tie, I'm letting the rail heat up, and by the time the rail heats up, that tie will get up to temperature just fine. So literally, this is all that we're doing, is just going right down. There we go. The joints are looking really good. Move the camera here for a little bit. And when we're done, we'll run the truck all over here. But with the track gauges, it makes very, very quick work of when everything is clean, the solder just gets wicked right into it. And I have absolutely no globs. The joints are coming out nice and shiny, and things are looking really, really good. I just moved things there, which is not a good thing. So we're going to put another little piece of weight right there. And again, you don't want things to move while you're soldering. You don't want to have to force rail into position. So just a couple little swipes with solder, and we're on our last one already. And I think we soldered. Turn everything off. Make sure the soldering iron's not going to roll on me. I'm wearing shorts right now, and look at this. This is what we literally just soldered right here. And when you look at these joints, they're nice and clean. So I'll show you what we're going to do next. We'll put the camera back down again. So when you're done, you just want to take your wire brush, which is right here, and we're just going to kind of clean it. You can barely tell that there's any solder on here. And then when I'm done, I like to wire wheel everything again, and then I'll take it in the sink and use an old toothbrush and actually scrub everything with Dawn dish soap. So super rock, and it looks pretty good. So there we go. So there's a quick little primer on how to solder. I'm going to move the camera again. And Speed, if you have any questions.
Soldering, is it what?
Where you live. No, let's not get lost in details.
Do you prefer flux to acid?
Well, I like using acid-based flux, and that's what we saw in a decoder, where acid-based flux is more heat. It's quick, it's easy. You just have to make sure you clean it off, which you can do track work. But if you're soldering a decoder, or if you're,
do you have any?
A very, very fine tip. And again, practice, practice, practice. If you need to solder a part to a circuit board, I would try to find some spare parts somewhere, find an electronic surplus store, either online or in a city near you. So this is a different technique than what
Quickly.
they tend to pop off less if your track isn't perfectly bent to where you're going. They'll work either way. You have, just on this example, you have 3 points of contact versus if you did it this way, you only have 2.
So you're not changing the gauge by flipping it around?
No, the gauge is the same. And the other thing, and I'll try to hold that close so it's in focus, you'll actually see that where it's machined right here, it's not square sitting on the rail. It's actually like a curve. So again, this is a 15-inch radius in O scale, and these things just slid right along. So these will work on very tight radiuses as well too. And they're very, very fine. They're still within the NMRA. They are within the NMRA standard. I've noticed on some flex track that I have that the flex track is actually a little broader than what these gauges are. Still within spec, but just a little bit broader.
Right.
But having your rail a little bit tighter is only going to get you tighter, but within spec, within the NMRA standard, is going to get you better performing track work.
What resistance welder are you using?
I have an American Beauty. My model is 105A3. It's basic 2. I didn't buy that one because soldering track and soldering electronics in code 125, the 100 watt is more than enough. If you need to solder 148, I know some guys out there still doing code 172. I would recommend getting the higher unit, but Micromark sells them. You can get them directly from American Beauty. The one thing I will tell you is if you order the resistant, or I'm sorry, the single point electrode, which I actually prefer using in all of my track. The only time I use the tweezers when I solder track is when I'm doing frogs, just because I want to hold the two pieces together and then hit it with some solder. But other than that, I use the single electrode. And sometimes when you order that single electrode, it comes with a carbon tip. And these carbon tips literally snap with any pressure whatsoever. So I went with a pressure on it and then, get a few more months out of it. I maybe go through maybe 2 of these tips a year. So it's through the whole thing. You could end up with some track marks on your arm. So while you're soldering, you never want to lean on your track work anyway. Put some on it and then, try to keep any other extremities off of the track and it'll be fine. But just be careful when you unclip this guy after, soldering a turnout or crossing where you're doing a lot of intensive soldering, this clip will be extremely hot. So just give it a minute and let it cool off and then take it off and you'll be a tip right here. And, I'm touching it and it's only been 7 minutes since we finished soldering and it's already cool to the touch. So you're creating again, you're basically making an electrical circuit, and where this tip is touching something, it's interrupting the circuit, which is creating resistance, which is very quickly creating pinpoint heat. The advantage to resistance soldering is you're getting in fast, you're heating the joint up fast, and then you're getting the heat off of it fast. So you aren't heating up other parts of where you're trying doing any parts, any like photo etch parts on engines. You want to solder it and then move on quickly on certain parts. So you have to be careful. And again, sometimes on circuit boards, using a regular soldering iron and then, this little tip that I showed you earlier, great. So when I'm soldering wires to a decoder, so I can get in really quick and then get some solder on that joint and then, basically pulling up the tip so you get a nice cone shaped solder, on that.
For those.
So, it's never a good thing. Anything that you solder, it is never a good thing to lean on whatever you're soldering because it will be a little warm. And, the other thing I want to stress is, don't be afraid of metal. Solder it, cut some new pieces, be scared. So if something doesn't turn out right, if you burn it, you can pull it off, unsolder it, file off the excess solder, clean up the joint, and, keep moving on. So, that's something that you really can't do in plastic, where at least with metal, you can save your work. The rail isn't in a few minutes.
Well, Kevin, thank you very, very much. Please stay safe.
Will do.
Thank you for helping us out.
All right.
Hour again. There's a couple of, but looks like, but as I will. So I guess this time at the moment. I can tell you it's pretty cold here in Queensland. It's 2 minutes to midnight. But we're actually in the next day. We're in Sunday now, so I can give you the lottery numbers. They were 48, 32, 17, 11, and 12. So we'll give that a go. Anyway, we'll get our next guest organised here and say goodbye to Kevin, and we'll see you soon.
All right. See you guys. Thank you.
Bye. Whoa, crash building and one car.
So basically this clinic is designed to show you some basic concepts when starting out and building Craftsman style kits. And when we're talking about Craftsman style kits, it's basically wood kits, but Craftsman kits have evolved into hydrocal and resin. So it's not just wood. We're going to go over some tools needed, some basic building techniques, painting, and also some assembly techniques. But first, obviously, safety is first. When you're using blades and painting, you want to protect yourself, obviously. With that, if you're going to buy some tools, make sure you buy quality tools. Spend a little extra now, and they'll last you a long time. I'm still using the same tools. Now, when I was building this presentation, I was looking at all the tools that I have. So we'll just go over some of the things that you can use. For instance, a cutting mat, number 11 blade, a chopper, a razor blade. They work very, very well. Glue, it's personal preference, and we'll go over that once I get to the gluing section. Paint and paint brushes, a grout sponge, a pencil, rubber bands, a metal ruler, weathering supplies, believe it or not, a nail sander, and I'll show you how to use that in a second, and obviously many more. So there's no right or wrong tool, whatever you're comfortable with. So getting started. So for this clinic, I used a Foscale Models Huxley and Powell Foundation Series kits. I found that these kits are great for beginners. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to show you how to build a Craftsman simple kits, and it's a great way to learn. Once you open up your model, you want to open your kit, look at all the stuff, and familiarize yourself with the contents and read the instructions. So this is the model that we're going to build, or I'm going to show you I built. And this is how they come. And when you open it all up, this is what it's going to look like. So you want to look at the directions. It's going to show you where to put bracing. It's going to talk about the trim and the doors and the windows and the roofing and assembly. So you want to make sure that you familiarize yourself with all the pieces. Now you're dealing with this kit. This is basswood, 1/16 basswood. So the first thing you want to do is brace your walls. And I'm going to go back up to slide. Now the kit comes with 2 pieces. You could also add extra bracing if you wish. It's entirely up to you. It will work. The glue I use is Wellbond glue. There was another modeler that recommended it, and I tried it, and I sized based on your wall. So this is where you're going to use your pencil, mark off the bracing, and then you don't need a lot of glue to brace because you don't want to break being glued. So you want to make sure that the placement is correct. If you want to add extra bracing, that's great, but you want to make sure you're buying 1/8 square basswood. Well, local hobby shops or even some of the hardware stores are carrying it now, and they have a little hobby section. So this is the glue I use. You can order this on Home Depot online. You can order it in this size glue you should put on for your bracing. And even when you put this amount of glue on. So this is the front wall of the building that's braced. And then you can use any type of weight you want. I have all different types. I have these. I have, believe it or not, I use sections of actual rail that I use to weight things down. Whatever you can use to weigh 20 minutes. It's done. It's already you're ready to go on to the next piece. So once all your walls are braced, the next thing you can do is stain your wood. Some people they'll distress the wood, but just to keep it simple for this presentation, the next step is basically to stain it. You're not going to need, and the reason why you stain it is when you start painting it. That adds a level of realism to the model. You don't need to stain it, but it's going to look a lot better if you do. So you're not going to need a lot of stain, but just enough. If you put more stain than you need, it's going to lead to a little bit more warping. But don't worry about the warping because you can fix it. Now, when you're using your paint, Hunterline stains products, they have a whole bunch of different colors. And also I use various strengths of alcohol in the ink wash. I use an oil wash with that, but I don't use it all the time. I only use it on select models. Be aware of where your bottle is. I haven't done it yet, but I've heard of others that have done it. You're gonna start staining your wood. And I also put, you have a 1/16 square strip wood there as well. All right. There's another picture of the stain I use. And now I begin. So you don't need a lot of stain, believe it or not. Very little is needed, and then you move on to the next piece. Now, I would recommend after you stain it, you could blot it with a towel just to get some excess off, and then you're going to want to put the weights back on it again. Now, if you look at this picture, this is when I'm using just a little bit of stain, you can see the angle of the wall now. So the wall did warp on me, which is perfectly normal. So if this happens, don't start putting your paint on. So now I'm putting the weights back on, and this stain doesn't take that long to dry. So it's probably going to take 15-20 minutes, and then you can start working with it again. Staining process, you can start painting your walls, your trim, and your windows, unless you're painting everything the same color. You're going to want to use a really good automotive primer. Now, what I've noticed over the years, the gentleman who owns Seaport Model Works basically told me to grab this automotive primer, and it's Napa Colorline DC550, and you don't lose any of the details or anything like that. And you don't need a lot of primer to paint your windows, and it'll last you a long time. So craft paint is my paint of choice for Craftsman kits. If you go to Michael's, lines that are available for you to choose from. Some are more expensive than others, but I like to mix and match my colors. So one brand won't have certain colors and another brand will. So I buy what I like. What I've noticed, some of the more expensive ones may have a better pigment. So for instance, Folk Art makes a nice, they make a nice line of rust colors that you can buy for sort of birds the rust in the paint. So as far as brushes, you can start with a 1/4 or a 1/2 inch brush. They work well, but again, it's personal preference. Use what works for you. You can buy the brushes at Michael's for $10 a package. Okay, so here's an example of the windows, how they come. They're actually part of the sprue. And I bought this sprue cutter. You can find them on eBay, or your local hobby shop can probably get it for you. They're really good. They're not cheap. They're like $20 a piece. But again, you spend the $20 now, and that sprue comes off. But now here comes what I talk about the nail clipper, or not the nail clipper, the nail file. And there's another example of cutting the window out. You're gonna have a nail file, and then if you're building a model for a contest, you're definitely gonna want to pay attention to things like this. So then you get your windows together, or your doors, and get a piece of cardboard, get some tape, and just tape them on, and then lightly hit them with the primer. If you notice that it's very little bit of primer that's on the windows right now, and that's the amount you need. You don't need a lot of primer. You just mist it on. You just want to cover that raw plastic. and that's going to give you a surface for your paint to bite. Okay, so when your windows are drying with primer, you can go back to your walls and start painting. So this wall I painted with craft paint, and what I did is I just reduced it with water, and I used it like a wash. Now, be careful. If you're not experienced yet, then you can use a regular full strength craft paint and just brush it on, or dry brush it, whatever technique you want to use on your level that you want to achieve here. Now, I talked about getting a grout sponge, and this is where it comes into play. Make sure you use a quality grout sponge, and if you go to Home Depot, go where they sell the grout, and you'll find the grout sponges there. The grout sponges are about $2, $3, and then you want to cut it, use a snap blade, and then cut them into 1 to 2 inch squares. If you have any experience dry brushing, the sponge method is basically the same thing, but you're not using a brush, you're using a sponge. So there's an example. I was taught and a layering effect. So if you look to the section to the right, you're going to see how they're still in this. Well, they're still in that sprue there. And again, you're going to use the same method as a dry brush and just lightly dab it on. And then if you notice on the bottom, you're going to see like a. So then you're going to go in now with your next color is, well, for this model, it was green. And you can see the trim is painted in green, and also the corner bracing, or the corner, the 1/16 square corners are also painted. Now, I like to use it like this and use a sponge method on the corners just to show some more weathering. But you can use a brush on this if you wish. And if you notice in the background, so the next thing you want to do is get all your windows painted. You can use a brush with this. Make sure that you get all inside the edges, and as well as the outside edges. You don't want to have any type of plastic showing. You can use the acetate that comes with the kit and cut them out, or you can use, for instance, different types of glues. There's a product called Gallery Glass, and it's made by Plaid, and Plaid is a manufacturer of craft paint. But it's a factory, like a little mini factory. So I wanted the windows to be a little bit more hazy and more dirtier look. So Canopy glue will give you that haze. So you're going to want to use a toothpick and suspend within the window frame. You may have to do this a couple times, even after the glue is dried, depending on how thick the glue is. If it's thin, it will pull away from the edges, and you just got to touch it up. Now, I would recommend that you build yourself a tool. You can't buy this tool anywhere. Take a piece of foam board, get some 1/8 square basswood, or balsa wood will work on this too. And you're going to want to glue sections of the bracing down on the foam board, and it's going to be a resting piece for your windows to dry. If you were just to glaze your windows and then put them down on a piece of paper or something like that, the likelihood that the glue will stick to the paper and you're going to ruin the window. So it depends on what the weather is in your area, but allow them to dry for a few hours, and then you can, put them in the building. Used to build Craftsman kits, and then I eventually changed. But Canopy glue is great. So that's the tool I was referring to. And you want to have a section for smaller windows and then a section for bigger windows. So you're going to take your glue, put it on the end of the toothpick. This will take practice, so when you first do it and it doesn't work, don't worry. Practice makes perfect, so you'll get it. And then you want to drag the glue within the window. And make sure you use the back of the window, not the front. And then that's what it's going to look like. And that's what it looks like in the front. So the glue is going to sit within the frame, and then when it dries clear, it looks like a piece of glass, which is cool. Now, if you notice on this window, there's a couple different colors there other than green. And what I did before you glaze them, if you're gonna do any type of dry brushing or weathering, now's the time to do it before you glaze your windows. Even if you want to put a wash on there, so you can see that the window have a weathered look. So here's the windows all dry, and you notice some of them around the edges, the glue has pulled away. For purpose, we're going to use thin double-sided tape, and that's basically what it is. It's very good to use, especially when you're using signs and roofing. But when you're doing your signs, you want to make sure you have a brand new number 11 blade. If you have a dull blade, the likelihood of when you cut it out, of it ripping the paper and dragging across the is take your signs, turn them over, and put the transfer tape on the back and cut them out. If you want to weather them at this point, you can, and then position the signs on the building. Now I said using a toothpick gently rub the sign into the clapboards. That's a little typo. You can use a popsicle stick, and I'll show you why. Here's your transfer tape. So I the signs. Here they are, ready to go. Now you want to stick the signs where they're supposed to go. And right now the sign is stuck to the building, but it's sitting on top of the. So you're going to take this, we'll push the sign further onto the model and create an illusion that the sign. And then when it's all said and done, that's what it looks like. Now you can weather it more if you want. So what I do now is I'm going to take the alcohol India ink wash. And for this purpose, I'm using a medium version, which is 2 tablespoons of India ink to a pint of rubbing alcohol. And I'm using 91% rubbing. Okay, so when you're preparing the walls and trim, you want to glue on your trim and make sure that you follow the directions on where your trim goes, because you may have to trim it based on the angle of the wall. Now, when you put a little bit of glue on the trim, there will be some glue that builds up and what you're going to want to do is get rid of that excess glue and simply use the edge of a razor blade and then drag it out. Bands. You could use clamps. I did not use them on this application, but you can buy these DeWalt clamps at Home Depot. They're like $5 a piece. I would highly recommend you get them. They do come in handy when you're doing certain models. So I put the corner trim on. Now, if your corner trim is not 100% accurate as far as size, it's not a big deal because after it dries, you can go back and trim it with a razor blade. So you're going to have that excess glue, and what you're going to want to do is drag that glue out of there. And there's an example of me dragging the glue out, and you can see how much glue is sitting in there. Perfectly square, and you're not going to have any type of gaps or any problems with fitting. So at this point now, what you're going to do is start assembling your building. Now, some modelers put the windows in. I always put them in at the end. There's no right or wrong way to do that. But the 1, 2, 3 blocks, are so good, it keeps everything nice and straight. Now, if you notice on the bottom of the screen, there's another to the glass. I build all my Craftsman kits on glass because the glass is perfectly flat, so you don't want to have a wobbly kit. So you're going to start gluing the walls on. There's another example of the 1, 2, 3 blocks and the piece of glass. And then when you get the other walls together, then you can glue them all at once, and then using rubber bands just to secure them. Now, when you choose your rubber bands, you got to make sure you don't have a. So now the next step is we're going to get the roof card out, and we're going to prepare our paper. You're going to want to put some lines on the roof card. So take a metal ruler and draw some lines. Now, nice and straight. So the next thing you want to do is put your transfer tape over the top of the lines and then trim the excess tape off. Next, paint the underside black, about 1/8 of an inch around the inside edge. So you can use regular paint. You can use a Sharpie, that's fine. But you want this roof card on without doing that, and you look up, you're going to see the cardboard, and it's just not very appealing. So you want to make sure that that's not showing. And then you're going to glue your roof card on and let it dry. Just draw some lines. And then you can paint your lines. And I believe I used a Sharpie on this. And this is what it's going to look like looking up, and you can see that it's, it creates that shadow, and it's not, raw cardboard. So preparing the tar paper. Now the kit comes with tar paper or roofing paper. You can use it as is, which is gray, or you can paint it. It's entirely up to you. The colors you can use black, you can use gray, whatever you have. I used black, and I had some army green that I used. And then you can just paint it and then flip it over and then cut out the roof paper using the lines that are on the other side. You'll see it. You're going to want to have like a 1/32 overlap on the edge of the roof, and then also on each piece of tar paper. Unless you're doing a flat factory roof, I'll put them right next to each other, the tar paper pieces. But when you're doing a roof like on this model, you want to have a little bit of overlap, and then you want to stagger the pieces and cut them if needed. So there's your tar paper or roofing paper that comes with the model. And I just put some paint on the back. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You cut your pieces out, peel your transfer tape back. Now the sticky part is down, and then you can see the lines are exposed, and you can start putting your paper on, and that's what it's going to look like. Now, adding window shades. This is optional, but it will give your building a little bit of character. You can use cardstock. You can use paint. I use, for this model, I use Depot Buff, which is an old, it's an acrylic paint, and I can't think of the name of it, but you can't get it anymore. But other paint manufacturers are making that color. So make sure the windows are right side up. How do I know that? Because I painted a shade on a window. Give you a hard time. Use a variety when painting the shades. So you may have a window that's the shade is half drawn, or even just a little bit, or almost fully down. You may need 2 coats of paint to accomplish this. And then once your windows are dried with the shades, if you choose to do that, then you can install them. So that's the name of the paint I use. I've had that bottle for years. So And then, okay, so final trim installation. Once that you can install your trim and assemble the windows, and you're going to assemble your doors if they're laser cut. You're going to also put your chimney on. Chimney is a two-piece door, so the blank wall that goes down first, and then the other one will go on top of that, which makes a nice door. And if you notice, there's a couple different colors in there. The gray, for a simple kit, motivated. They can be rewarding and fun. Starting small and working your way up to larger kits is a great way to also sell. They do carry a lot of different products. Check them out. There's their website, thoughtscalemodels.com, and model. And there it is. So you can see when you have the window shades, how it looks. Again, it's a great looking model for what it is. Very simple to build. Now, kits. There are some items that you can do to it. If you're happy with the way it came out, then leave it. But if you want to add more to it, then do it. Weathering. You can add more powders, oils, and washes. You can add detail castings. You can add a bump out. You can add fine details such as rust streaks, tar sealer around the chimney stack and around stacks and chimneys. You can add a concrete slab, or you can start putting lighting in your buildings. It's something that's really cool if you ever tried it. So I started putting lights in buildings a few years ago, and a company called Microlumina. Great company. I buy all my lights through this company. And this is a kit. This is just on the top, or it's on the top of the box. So it just shines on that window. So you don't have a whole building lit up. And it came out pretty good to create that. And I put I put like a vent on the side, and I start using oil paints on that. You go around the other side of the building, I just start loading it up with castings. And it's amazing what you can make the model become just by adding castings to it. Right around the model. And the model looks totally different. I put a bump out on the end. I put another smokestack coming out of the bump out. And that wood that I used on the bump out was excess wood from the kit. So it actually comes with the extra wood that you could do to do this. And then I had also detailed castings for the vents and the roof. And then I added mortar to the chimney. Down so it rips and peels back to make it look weathered. And then you're going to start adding weathering powders to it. That roof definitely needs some repair. And then when you add it, when we put the lights on, that's what it looks like. So it makes it look like somebody's upstairs in that building. Or even downstairs. So I ended up putting 2 lights in that building. But you can actually light up the outside as well with other lights. And that brings me to the end of the presentation.
You ready for some questions? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
First question, what is a bump out?
A bump out is it's just an added on piece to the structure. It could be what you see there in the picture, another like a room, or it could be an overhang. So that's what a bump out is.
Okay, starting at the beginning. Why the weld bond rather than Elmer's white glue or white glue? Wood glue, sorry.
Wood glue works well. the weld bond glue is just personal preference on my part, but I found that the weld bond sets than your normal. Yes, I have. I primed once. I usually prime the back. I did it on a structure once to prevent warping. And there was one model that I did that I painted the inside black because I put 17 LEDs in it. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't have any type of light bleeding through. I don't prime the outside only because I don't want to lose the wood, the raw wood. But I have done the inside before.
Someone had problems with warping, as you mentioned. So is the wash mentioned water-based, or
yes,
any recommendations?
Warping is going to happen no matter what. I would just try to control the amount of products you put on at any given point. And you know, if you put paint on, you know, if you put too much on, wipe it off, and then immediately go to the weights. The weights will actually be your friends when you're building these models, because it's going to keep everything straight until the wood dries. The wood's going to move regardless of what you do. But to minimize that, just try to control the amount of product you're putting on. And it's going to warp whether it's water-based or even solvent-based.
Where do you buy your transfer tape? Or 2 teaspoons?
Light, medium, and a dark wash, and it's teaspoons. Dark will be 3.
Cool. You showed a piece of glass there. Is it safety glass?
No, it was an extra piece of square.
Comments you got from showing that model. It looks extremely well done.
Thank you very much.
So thank you for your time, and thank you for presenting on Gateway X.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, Speed. Well, it's back round to the top of the hour, so we all know what time that is. Question: Hey, what?
Side.
82 degrees F. Well, Simon says it's a nice and sunny day in Kent in the UK. And Andy Ambrose says it's 26 degrees in Essex. So that must be a heat wave in Essex, I reckon, 26 degrees. So anyhow, we'll give the old wheel another nudge. And the question this hour is, do you have? So if your better half is watching the stream, it might be prudent to be modest in how, and we'll take it from there. What do you reckon, Speed?
Ready to go. enthusiast. He is the editor of White River Productions' monthly Model Railroad News and HO Collector Quarterly. An avid collector, and as you'll see in a minute, enjoys hobby history. We welcome Tony Cook.
Thank you, Speed. And guys, what are how Rio Grande's ski train operations? And I'm going to give basically a lot of prototype information for you on the train and where it operated, and then talk a little bit about models that are available or have been available in the past and are coming soon. Actually, we've got some exciting ski train things coming out later this year. So without further ado, we'll get into that. As Speed mentioned, have been the editor of White River's Model Railroad News, monthly news and review magazine for all scales model trains for almost 10 years now. And this year is Model Railroad News' 25th anniversary. And our August issue that's arriving now is Rio Grande themed. So very appropriate that we're going to talk about Rio Grande Ski Train today. That's the Coach Yard's new brass HO scale steam generator car, which at times did service on the ski train as well as the Rio Grande Zephyr in the 1970s and just into the 80s. I also, as Speed mentioned, I'm the co-editor of HO Collector Quarterly, which covers hobby history for all things 187th. And our third quarter 2020 edition is arriving now with a look at operating hopper car accessories and 62-foot 3-dome tank cars. I also contribute to Railroad Model Craftsman, another monthly publication from White River. The June issue has my collector consist talking about F-units. So check out all those great things. The websites for each of the magazines is available online to go to, or shop.whiteriverproductions.com will get you access to everything as well. Denver and Salt Lake operation. The map we're looking at here is Rio Grande system map of, approximately, I guess I would call this a classic Rio Grande. After the MOPAC Western Pacific mergers, Rio Grande gained access into Kansas City via the Missouri Pacific's Colorado Eagle line that went east out of Pueblo in the southern part of Colorado. That would be in kind of the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And then, of course, the Rio Grande stayed independent until 1988 when its parent company purchased Southern Pacific. So the little road bought the big road, but the SP identity generally is what took hold, and it stayed around until the mid-90s when Union Pacific merged with Southern Pacific. So today, what's left of the Rio Grande, which mostly it's still intact. There are some things that are not, that are on this map that don't exist today. But the main line, Denver to Salt Lake, and then the access across the joint line south of Denver is all still in operation by Union Pacific and is used by Amtrak between Denver and Salt Lake, and BNSF has rights over Denver to Salt Lake traffic as well. So we're going to be basically looking at the Denver area west to Moffett Tunnel and Winter Park, which you can see Moffett Tunnel, the little white box interrupting the black line heading west out of Denver. It's about 50 miles by rail out to Moffett Tunnel and Winter Park, and we will get into both how the railroad originally went over the top of the Continental Divide there, as well as the Moffett Tunnel project of the 1920s, as both of those factor into the development of the ski area at Winter Park. Is the scheme that basically served later for the ski train and other equipment. This is Aspen Gold and Silver was Rio Grande's colors with black lettering and black striping. This picture is, I would guess, probably early 1960s shot of what looks to be a pretty good-sized Royal Gorge. The most famous, Rio Grande carried it from Denver to Salt Lake. The participating roads were Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy on the east side, and Western Pacific took the train from Salt Lake to California. As you can see from that classic 1950s Ford down there in front of the Alco PAs with the person waving at the train, gives you an idea of the time frame. If you were standing there today, this would be unrecognizable beyond the tracks are still there and the portal is there, that so much has built up and the ski area has become such a destination for travelers. But this is what it looked like, about 20 years. Another train that operated along this route, and another perfect pike-sized passenger train, was Rio Grande's Yampa Valley. It originally was the Yampa Valley Mail. It ran out to Craig, Colorado in the northwestern part of the state on the original Denver and Salt Lake system. Denver and Salt Lake's original aim was to be a straight connect happening. The service looked like most of the time. This is it at Granby, Colorado, heading west. Granby is about a half an hour west of Winter Park in the Moffett Tunnel area. This is one of those neat dome observation cars that I believe was originally built in the late 50s for the Chessie train that never happened. And these cars ended up on Rock Island, and Rio Grande bought some. And then there's an RPO car ahead of it. It lost its mail contract as trains between Denver and Salt Lake City ran south on the original Rio Grande. So you go almost to Pueblo. At Canyon City, you turn and head into the Wood Canyon. That train was off by the mid-1960s. The California Zephyr survives as California service for its last year after it, with the Burlington as a California connection train, with the SP picking up at Ogden heading west for its last year in 1970. Then in 71, as Amtrak came into being, Rio Grande, kind of late in the game, decided not to join Amtrak and famously continued running its Denver to Salt Lake train as a tri-weekly run, the Rio Grande Zephyr. And this is a picture of that train. It held and went into service in 1949. That train continued to operate until April of 1983, when Amtrak did Amtrak did begin operating between Denver and Salt Lake over the Rio Grande. And the San Francisco Zephyr, the Front Range to Cheyenne and west on the Union Pacific. And in 83, as these changes were made, it went back onto the Rio Grande line, although the Western Pacific end was not part of the CZ line that SP helped. And then today's California Zephyr, which I just saw last week, was out there with my dad for a few days in Colorado, and we caught the California Zephyr at both. CZ looks like today, although there was no snow when we were there in July, although I did see that it had snowed in June up there, so you never know. This is 9,000 feet approximately above sea level. Denver is a mile high, so you do have quite a climb from up to Utah Junction, which was a spot on the old Denver and Salt Lake. Then you head up northwest of the downtown Denver area, make the climb up around Big Ten Curve and through the Flatirons and then into the mountains. Tolan is over on the east side and is approximately the jumping off point where the railroad used to go over the top of Rollins Pass, which was 11,000 feet. This is that climb over famous Moffett Road Hill route. Was the highest standard gauge operation during its time. It was built and opened for business around 1912, and it lasted until the tunnel was open in February of 28. Then it sat dormant until it was torn out in 1936. But this is an amazing run up over the Continental Divide. It can still be accessed from both sides. The tunnel at the top, and you're going to want to do it in a car that can do that, or can handle bouncing over 1,660 feet above the tree line, and is really, if you've never been up there, it's something it would be in the lower right side here, and this is one of the reasons why they ended up having to tear the line out with automobiles. That you come up, you don't actually go across the trestle, that it's not safe, and again, with the tunnel not there, you can't get around. So there are spots along the original Moffett line where they've kind of cut in some roads that you bypass things. But it's really an epic what it looks like today. There's the surface of the trestle, and then this is the remains of the portal and the snow sheds in the lower right of the tunnel you see in the picture above. There was a town at the top called Corona, and then further down towards Winter Park was Arrow, and Arrow was a town of 2,500 with saloons and everything at one time. And now if you go up there, you can see a couple of foundations on time. Popular ski resorts. This is a map of the slopes. The tunnel would be basically at the lower left, comes down over Berthoud Pass, which connects back in near Empire, Colorado to I-70 between Denver and the Eisenhower Tunnel. As you can see, what a deal. How about that? $3.10 for a round trip up there. Man, even if you didn't ski, that would be a fun day to go do. That's a vintage ad showing the packages to Winter Park. And then at the right, we'll get to the equipment here. This is what was purchased later. These are the Canadian Bombardier cars that replaced the original Northern Pacific cars on the ski train. And there are some Jeep 6 above the cab. And then you can see the fan replacements, that whoever replaced the fan obviously didn't have any Flocal engine black, but very typical of, as parts get changed out on locomotives, that it doesn't always go back to the factory fresh representation. PAs in this week or so, there's even more just with all of these buildings. And if you'll remember that picture we looked at earlier, I think there was maybe the one building sitting down near the tunnel, and then the old chairlift had like a little shack that it ran out of. So basically an entire town exists here now. But the chairlift is a fun way to go up and down because you get lost behind the West Portal. So like March, they did occasionally run specials in other parts of the year, but it primarily was a way for folks in Denver to. The ski train essentially ran on the weekends, so the Zephyr would leave and the ski train would follow it. And this shot shows, this is an early 1980s picture. You can tell from the 5771F unit on the left has had its pilot redone. This was after a grade crossing, I believe, is sitting there to the right with GP40s for power. And that, of course, is at Denver Union Station, the station there at the left in downtown, where these classic Northern Pacific heavyweight passenger cars. It's a paired window coach. Rio Grande did modify them. You can look at the windows, and this is a later picture that shows the sealed gaskets around the windows. Obviously not how they were when they were Northern Pacific cars, but these are classic heavyweight cars, somewhat similar to Walther's HO scale passenger cars have been offered and point. This would be an excellent model for fitted or passenger cars. The roof, the ends, the underframe are all separate, fairly authentic ski train car, and you could build a ski train with their cars if that was a project they would adopt at some point, which was operating both the RGZ and the ski train. They had to employ more than one of their steam generators. This is an old steam locomotive tender that served as one of the steam generators. They also had two of their Alco PB1s that were converted in the mid-1960s to water boilers, and they, again, were used across both the RGZ and the ski train. The combine car I mentioned is the one odd piece. There were two of these cars. They ran both in the Rio Grande Zephyr. The Zephyr did not have its original CZ baggage car, so this is what was always on the RGZ, was this combine. And then this also ran the other one in the ski train. Rio Grande had two of these cars. They're from the Prospector equipment, and they ran through the 1970s and into the 1980s. And then the cars also served on the ski train. They are different. That it's 1230 and 1231, and it's the window patterns that make the difference. That small, thin window above the 1230 number there, I think on the other car, that window's not there, and then the two small windows back towards the door are different on the other car. So they're not exact duplicates of each other, but generally they are this style car in both cases and worked on both trains. The ski train generally always operated with Rio Grande freight units, and in the 70s, it would be a mix of everything from GP30s to GP40-2s. This is at Pine Cliff on the east side of the Continental Divide, and here's a train coming up to Winter Park. This is a little further down the line, but opposite direction. This would be a train returning back to Denver. This is an eastbound coming out of Moffett Tunnel, and as you can see there, as I mentioned, there's a couple of Jeep 40s. There's the steam locomotive tender steam generator. This is very doable and makes a very respectable looking train. The size did change from time to time, but again, this is not an overly long train that you could produce and put out on your layout. It went off. For a couple of years, the F units did do various services, everything from some work train business on Tennessee Pass to some more glory assignments like doing the ski train. And here's the full complement of RGZ power. The F9, the two booster B generator car being the Alco. You don't have the steam locomotive tender. You still have the combine car that was usually always in the consist, and then the Northern Pacific coaches are behind the train. This is a curve going into Pine Cliff, and again gives you an idea. This is an F unit powered train, again with 6 of the Northern Pacific cars. So again, another easy to do train, and using the Walther's cars as stand-ins will, get you there for the most part. The combine's a little bit more of a struggle. You could do some kit bashing to create that in HO scale. There have been brass models of it done as well. In this shot, the train's about to go into the cliff. There's that tunnel it's coming out, going in the opposite direction, heading down to Denver. Down in Tabor now, from steam days up to diesel days. I've been out there since the early 70s, and the turntable portal. or to Moffett Tunnel. But the train went west from Denver through the tunnel, stopped and dropped off its collect passengers at Winter Park to go back. This is at Fraser again. This is Amtrak's stop. Fraser and Winter Park basically almost run into each other now. They used to be separated by quite a bit, but as things have grown out there, you basically drive out of Winter Park and directly into Fraser. This is a train pointed eastbound. Looks like a morning shot, and this would be it getting ready to head up to pick up passengers to head back to Denver. This is down on the Front Range, and this is an interesting shot. We're moving over here. This is actually the Bombardier cars, and then the steam generator is the modified Alco PB that it got a lot of work done to it in the late 80s and changed in appearance quite a bit. And this, interestingly enough, has 3 units. The middle unit there, you'll notice, has a different color of the Rio Grande Action Orange. This is a former Penn Central Conrail Jeep 40 that Rio Grande purchased in the early 80s to help them with motive power. Once they got the line from Pueblo into Kansas City, they bought a set of GP40s. You can spot those because they didn't have the nose light as the first unit has, and the Kansas City Mid-America rail car paint job gave them a more reddish orange versus the Rio Grande's more aspen gold action orange. We're back here again this is around Tolan. The Rollins Pass route would be to your left. The train is nearing the east portal, and this is a classic look of the train with a couple of Jeep 40s. The steam locomotive tender, I believe there are brass models of it, or it would certainly be an interesting kit bash project to do, but would be one to have. There's a work train parked on thing that sits there now, but I believe there still is a line into it. But this is the train picking up passengers and ready to head into the Moffett Tunnel. This takes us back to the mid-60s around the tracks. Don't try that today. Now there's a bridge-like signal surveillance thing over the bridge area that if you come anywhere close to that, announcements go off that you're violating private property. But this looks like it was a summer run of some time because it's obviously not winter. This is 1965, but where the train is parked, I've heard the train came up and parked there at times between the tracks because there's a giant wall that circles the outside of that today. So again, night and day, and all of this area is non-accessible, tall fences around it also. No walking down to the portal with ease today. Park type area, there's a couple of placards that are set up now that talk about the development of the tunnel and the line over the top. But behind the tunnel and up to the top is a walking route, a Continental Divide trail that's become very popular. And we were there on a weekday a week or so ago. So again, a very popular walking trail. And so as such, access near the tunnel. Go into the west portal. To the left, this is a westbound freight train that has just exited the Moffett Tunnel. And then to the right would be the ski slope. You've got to check out and find Runaway. It's a 1973 TV movie produced by Universal. It aired on ABC in December. Changed the name of the railroad to Sierra Pacific, as you can see here. They painted a Jeep 30, a Jeep 35, and then this poor Jeep 40. They painted these 3 locomotives. They re-lettered some of the ski train equipment, Sierra Pacific. And the train, I don't think they say Winter Park, and they renamed Denver, I think, Jackson City. And it's about the train losing its brakes. Ben Johnson there in the lower right corner is the engineer, of course, on his last run, and then this horrible disaster happens. The shot in the top right is the Arvada, which is a Denver suburb. Fire department is shown at one point where the train comes around the corner and they still haven't been able to stop it as it's coming in. Naturally, the train does stop, but they do make it. But so I should have said spoiler alert. The one thing I like too is here at the left, you see everyone screaming. The silver Jeep 40 is called out of Denver or Jackson City in the movie to come couple up to the end of the train and apply its brakes and stop the train. And I hate to think if you really had a couple of runaway Jeeps on the front end, the train couldn't stop, and you pulled a Jeep 40 up to those old Northern Pacific coaches and put on the brakes, I would speculate that you'd basically yank the coupler. Video or streaming, it's never been on DVD. As I say, it was produced by Universal. I think there may be like bootleg copies of it on YouTube. It has like Martin Milner from Adam 12, Vera Miles, and a lot of other, TV type stars. The guy that directed it also went on to one to check out. Here's a shot down in the Denver area of the scene where they're trying to couple on with the Rescue Silver Hero GP40, and you can see the flat car with the filming equipment and a Rio Grande switcher is brought out for the pacing along the side. But really, again, something to check out, and what a fun thing. I've always thought this would be another great modeling project, is I want to do decals and do the set of Sierra Pacific diesels. The ski train, went through its changes in the late 80s. As Southern Pacific became part of Rio Grande system, the ski train itself was actually sold off and became part of ANSCO, which was Philip Anschutz that owned the railroads. They basically spun the ski train into its own like corporate identity. It was sponsored by Budweiser that the railroad picked up, and most of them are the same. There are a couple of with food service and different windows, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But this gave the ski train a modern look. And then see, they kept the Rio Grande paint scheme. It kept a Rio Grande Herald, though it says ski train over the top. So while at a glance you'd think this would look at the Canadian Bombardier cars, and this shows you both. This is the club car that we see here center, and then there's 3 car sets are shipping now, and they should be arriving. We'll look at that briefly here at the end of the presentation. I'll give you some information on locating these HO cars. Ski train here again with F40s, and it's interesting at the time I had them lettering, or I mean it's first, and then at the boat tail obs and a couple of late era ski train with F40s and the Bombardier cars. And here's that train again. I mentioned the Wilson McCarthy. It was renamed Kansas during the Anschutz era, and as you can see here, look closely, that says Winter Park near the entrance of the Moffat Tunnel, and then that coach train, and they, I think one of the cars was California, that they basically named states beyond Colorado and Utah. And again, these cars, the Wilson McCarthy, Walthers, Broadway Limited, other people make cars like that, so stand-ins, can be put together fairly easily. This is looking down at Fraser, just west of Winter Park. Tabor and Ash, where I talked about where the train turned around, would be at the far left side there. This is where the 2% starts heading up to the West Portal. That it's not flat, but back at Fraser towards the end of the train is where the 2% starts and the train makes its climb up to the West Portal. This is heading into West Portal and this would be later in the era where the ski train was re-equipped. And all the equipment was sold off and gotten rid of, and not really due to not being popular. I think the train always did well, but just first incarnation of it, they put wraps on some of the superliners assigned to the service, as well as they had F40s on both ends. This is actually the end of the train. You can tell by the red marker lights. And it was CenturyLink telecommunications company was the sponsor. This is a shot of the train down at Denver in its CenturyLink incarnation. And I mentioned to you to remember that one spot on the curve. This is what that curve going into the West Portal looks like now. This large wall has been built up, and to access the train, they do have a couple of access points through, and the current ski train operation, and then this one done by CenturyLink, actually did pick up and drop people off here on the curve, but there's this very tall wall that separates the ski area from the railroad. Announcement thing that goes off, the West Portal is just ahead of us. It's right behind the person standing there by the ski train, and that's the area at the West Portal today and how it looks. For models, this is a very interesting, this is not a Rio Grande prototype, but this is Rapido's steam generator car. It's based on a Canadian prototype. I've got a couple of these just because it was so cool. It is number 251, which matches one of the steam locomotive tenders. The original version of this produced smoke, so it was a real steam generator looking Grand again. These were fairly hard to find for quite a few years. And it's a neat little car. Again, if you're building a stand-in train, the detail is a legitimate prototype. For ski train equipment, there's been a lot of things done. These are Kato's in-scale F40s. The latest of Korea produced ski train coaches. So you can see they're 1011 through 1018 were imported by W&R Enterprises. And those date back, I believe, to the 80s. And I think that, to my knowledge, is the only legitimate HO models of the ski train, we'd have some good stuff. For decals, Microscale makes a sheet, as you see there, with striping, the ski train logo, and then names for the cars there in the right side. If you want to go to bigger scales, there's an MTH steam locomotive ski train. Here's a recent Lionel ski train. And again, these follow no prototype, as FTs were never lettered for ski train or anything, but it's a fun set to have. Some suggestions for reading. If you want to learn more about the Moffett Road and that original pass over the top, these books, all these are excellent. I probably go through one of these books at least once a month. Ed Bollinger's Rails That Climb and Harold Bonner's Giant's Ladder, as well as the Moffett Road. All three of those books on the left tell the story of the Denver and Salt Lake, and originally it was the Denver Northwestern Pacific, and David Moffett's attempts to build west from Denver after the Union Pacific and the Transcontinental Railroad decided to go north and bypass Denver. Just exciting stories on Western United States railroading and the building of the tunnel. Then more recently, Bob Griswold's Denver, Northwestern, and Pacific and his Denver and Salt Lake books are both excellent volumes that, again, lots of pictures, maps, and explanations of the line over the top. It's a fascinating bit of railroading. It was the highest standard gauge track in service in the U.S., as I mentioned. And as such, I've always been fascinated both with the Moffett Tunnel and Rollins Pass. And if you've not heard of it before, this is your first experience. For the ski train itself, Steve Patterson and Kenton Forrest, this is a softcover book on the left. The Rio Grande Ski Train is an excellent title. I believe it was printed by the Colorado Road Museum, and there's a couple of editions of it. It's fairly easy to locate a copy of that book. And then this other book covers that later era, again, 84 to 2009, is that era of the F-40s and the Bombardier cars. Ski Train to Winter Park is another book that I recommend picking up that you can do. As I say, this area has been one that was a vacation spot for myself and my family since the early 1970s. And the ski train has always been something that I never really saw because we were out there during the summer, but I always saw the Rio Grande Zephyr and sized pike-sized passenger train that you can easily put together. And I thank everybody for their time today. And I'm going to be back this afternoon, Speed, with Craig Ross of Blueford Shops. And we're going to talk about his interest in the hobby and his company and the challenges and the fun of being in scale model railroading.
That is true, but we can't let you go yet.
Oh.
People have a few questions.
Well, let's see if I have any answers.
Are there any models of those Bombardier cars?
Those are coming from Rapido trains. Those, I think, are called Comet cars. The sets are shipping now. There's 3 car sets. This is Rapido's website. And these are the cars that they're doing. These are going to be just amazing. They have 2 sets with 3, and these are shipping now. I've seen pictures of the sets, so they're on the way. And if you're looking for accurate F units, Athearn recently announced there's 5771, and the 2 booster B units are coming for the Genesis line. So if you want real high-level F units, those will be here before you know it.
Any models of today's ski train?
Today's ski track stuff that exists from Walthers, the Superliners, P42s are coming back from Cato, the GE diesels, and Athearn just announced a retooled Genesis P42 is coming. So the seasonal Amtrak operation is probably attainable by off-the-shelf pieces in both HO and N fairly easily.
Technical question from someone. When did the CN buy the ski train equipment for the Agua Canyon Tourist Railroad? Do you know?
That was 2009, I think, is when that original ski train goes away, and I think that's Algoma Central is where that ends up. So it would have been around that Algoma Central, and so that would have been around 2010.
Okay. So any of these cars that you showed before?
The F units are at the Colorado. As the Jeep 30 that was in the Runaway movie, and it's not been restored yet. The 30 is just sitting there at the museum. It still needs to be worked on. But no, I don't think any of the Northern Pacific cars were kept.
Ouch.
It's a fairly generic title. There's like a Tom Selleck, Kirstie Alley film from the mid-'80s. So when you go looking to search for it, put Runaway in 1973 in your search, and you'll find pictures and information. It was released theatrically in markets outside of North America. As I said, it was a December 73 movie on ABC TV.
I was almost there. So was it released on tape ever here in the States?
No, yeah, it's done by Universal and in affiliate as a kid in St. Louis, and I do remember seeing it on ABC when I was a little kid when it was new. But no, I've looked for it for years to pop up someplace to get a better copy, and sadly, no, never been on tape, Laserdisc, DVD, no, and never on any streaming. I always look for it like on Amazon or other things, but has never returned.
I just saw that someone posted a link to YouTube, which might be the same
Yes.
movie. So
yeah.
please go there when we're done here. Someone asked about one of your magazines, if it's available through distribution in the United Kingdom.
To our shop.whiteriverproductions.com website, it has information on purchasing individual issues or subscribing.
Since we have a few more minutes, you want to tell us about the next clinic you're going to give us about a train?
This afternoon business is not just in the business to be in the business, but is also a railroad person. And the things he's done in N-Scale are just really fantastic models. And we're going to be visiting with Craig at 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock. I'm in Central, so when I said 5, that's how he got started with the company, and talking about some of the challenges in producing models and being in the N-Scale business. So I think it's always fun for those of us on this side of things to get to learn some of those insights and hear some of those things of, well, why do you make this? Or how come you haven't made that? Or how, there's things we don't look at because we're looking at it from the, oh, I want one of these and I want it to be perfect. And it's like, well, here's the reality of how you get there. So it should be a very fun program, and that's this afternoon.
So how about a Tony Cook clinic in September?
In September? What are we doing in September?
And that's what we want to know. What kind of train you going to show us?
I don't know. This week I did high cubes earlier this week, and I've gotten a number of neat emails on the set of 86-foot high cubes that I did. That's a fun thing. And then the ski train today. So there's
videos.
What is on the bench stuff coming in on eBay, but then I've got some recent models. There's a new Tangent tank car that came out recently. They're 1917 design for a review that's coming up. And then, believe it or not, next year is Amtrak's 50th anniversary, and HO Collector, this is the first of Amtrak models. The Tyco scored first with Amtrak offerings in late 71 after Amtrak showed up in May of 71. And I'll be doing that as a cover story on original Amtrak, the models for its 50th, which that seems so incredible. Like Burlington Northern's 50, and then Amtrak is 50. It's like, how did that happen? I don't know how that happened.
Amazing.
Isn't it? Time marches on. Yes.
Well, Tony, thank you very much. There's been a lot of people in the chats that has rode on a ski train, so they were pretty impressed with your clinic today.
Oh, I appreciate the time, and thanks so much for the effort. I know you guys behind the scenes here have been working all week, and it's great to see you, and I'll be back with you later this afternoon.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so we'll have a little look at the big wheel of chat.
What was the question again?
Okay, the question was, how many locos did you have? So there's a couple of colourful answers in the stream there. James says, whatever I told the better half. And then later on, Joseph's bet 320. So sounds like a good place to go for an operating session. Andy Ambrose is saying it really means how many locos you have that are perfect and finished to the required standard. And he says, so thus he'd have 100 to 200, or about a dozen that are really good.
And I know of a person, no names named, that has more than 800.
Oh, well, there you go. So Anyway, we'll get ready here and we'll hit the wheel again and we'll see what we come up with this time. Okay, what era do you model? So that's the next question. So we'll come back after the break. We'll get our next presenter set up and we'll speak to you soon.
operations and is eager to learn, to share, discover along the way. When he's not in his basement, he enjoys cycling, reading.
And thank you so much, Speed, for the intro, and thank you to Gordy Robinson and to all the NMRAX team for putting this event on. I know that I've changed my sleeping habits and have lost a bunch of hours of sleep trying to keep up with everything, and I'm glad. So everybody, welcome. This is and right on cue, we've got the cuckoo clock that I forgot to turn off. Hopefully you don't hear that too bad, but this is a clinic on operating my layout, the Valley Local. No expert in operations, and I'm always interested in learning more about how the prototype operated, but this is how I've done things so far. So a little bit about me. Been into model railroading since December of 1982. My brother got a train set that Christmas, and by the end of the day, unfortunately for him, I pretty much adopted it and hit the ground running with my first issue of Model Railroader in January of 1983, which I still have, and have been off to the races pretty much ever since. But I've only been serious model railroader since I got married in 1995. I got a place of my own where I started building layouts and whatnot. I graduated high school in 1987, so now you know how old I am, and I started as a Valley Railroad in Essex, Connecticut, right after graduating high school. I did that for a few years before going off to college and doing some other things. So I actually have fired a steam locomotive on the line that I model, which is really pretty cool. Not too many people can say that. I started the current layout that you'll see today in 2011. And I blog about it and have a website and have a Facebook group. So I'm pretty prolific online as far as getting information out there because I enjoy sharing what I've learned. I enjoy just as much, if not more, hearing back from people and getting feedback on what I'm doing. I've been able to receive so much information and great criticism, constructive criticism. I went back to the railroad and firing a steam locomotive is a lot more difficult 30 years later, I can tell you. Sense of context for you, and apologies to those of you that have seen my modeling the Valley Local Clinic. This will be a little bit of review for you. But as you can see, unlike many railroads that were built around one or two trunk lines, the New Haven is a huge web of lines, a legacy of its being cobbled together from a number of smaller railroads. So for its size, tucked in southern part of New England, the New Haven Railroad offers an amazing variety of operating possibilities. Just look at all the branch lines. And you've got the main line from New York in the lower left corner to Boston, which is off screen up to the upper right corner. You've got the Maybrook Gateway that goes over the Hudson River to the west. And as a result of all the different railroads that made up the New Haven, it was primarily a large terminal railroad. I mean, there was no trunk lines really. I mean, you had the Maybrook line and the main line along the shore, but it was mostly a terminal railroad. Just taking loaded cars coming in from the west and south and delivering them to all the consignees. New Haven may have been famous for its name trains and passenger service between Boston and New York, but it was really the lowly freight trains, the lowly locals that worked all those branch lines that touched so many lives and are really perfect subjects for modeling. This sort of retail railroading really makes for some engaging operations, as we'll see. So again, by way of review, for those that saw the modeling clinic, but for those of you that didn't, this is a zoom in portion of that map that we saw earlier, Hartford at the top, Old Saybrook toward the bottom. And this is the line that I model. East Hartford is actually where the engine servicing facilities were, but the yard in Hartford is where the local would originate, and it would go down the west side of the Connecticut River all the way down to Saybrook. It was built in 1869 and 1872, absorbed by the New Haven in 1887. Passenger service actually ended on this line in two stages in the early 1930s. So by my era, which is autumn 1948, it's all freight only. Then it's intersected by the airline branch in Middletown. The airline had been the main line between New York and Boston, by way of Middletown and Willimantic back before the Thames River Bridge was built down in New London along the shore. But by my era, it's just secondary service with its own local that interchanges in Middletown. We connect to the shoreline at Old Saybrook, and the line is really served by 4 different locals. You have an east and westbound local along the shoreline. You have the North End Valley local going from Hartford down to Middletown and East Haddam. The westbound shoreline local heads up the south end of the Valley line from the south and meets in East Haddam typically, and the airline interchange. And it's really that contrast that I'm trying to capture on my layout, the contrast between the weedy branch lines and the double track main line, hand-thrown switches versus tower-operated controls, Form 19 versus signals, short local freight trains, named passenger trains. I get to operate a little bit of all of these different things, and that's really the irresistible pull that I am drawn to with this part of the New Haven. Gives you just about a taste of just about everything that the New Haven had to offer, except for electrification. So before getting into how I replicated the operations, let's look a little bit more at the prototype resources that I used in order to try and figure out what all I needed to do here. So if you're trying to follow a particular prototype and its operations, you want to go directly to the primary sources for your railroad on the New Haven. That's an employee timetable, which includes the passenger train schedules and a lot of the operating rules. I don't know if your railroad will have this, but the New Haven had basically it's the freight train timetable. It's called a Range Freight Train Service Book, a symbol book, and it gives you all the freight train schedules and how they interchange with one another, blocking instructions, where cars are coming from typically and where they're headed toward, which is very, very helpful for operations, obviously. Also, basically the public version of that is for the New Haven anyways, the Freight Train and Package Car Schedule book, which was, again, it was for the public. It gave it was a distilled version of the symbol book, but it gave customers all the information they needed in order to be able to figure out what the schedules were so they would know how to ship their freight. And of course, your railroad's going to have a public timetable. So this, it's handed out at every station, gives you all the passenger train schedules. And of course, your railroad is going to have a rule book, which is a little bit overkill for a model railroad. I'll do this in a vacuum, just look at the prototype. It can become its own hobby. So just a brief overview. I discovered that there are my 4 locals. There's the Valley locals up at the top, the airline local, the eastbound and westbound locals. So those are really my main characters. There's 4 local freights on my railroad that I focus on. The Valley local, which is Hartford Division Extra number 7, airline local, which is HDX 12. The 2 shoreline locals, Cedar Hill to New London, is Providence Division Extra number 1. New London to Cedar Hill, also known as the Haddam local, because in my era, that's the shoreline local that went up the branch to meet the North End local during my era. And so a little bit more detail. You may or may not want to get to this level of detail. As a matter of fact, the schedules, even though there's a schedule for the freight trains, the reality is that it was hardly ever, especially for the locals, that was hardly ever really met. These are really mostly times for when you can expect an agent to be on duty. But the cool thing is if you look down at the bottom there, it tells you that the shoreline crew does all the switching in East Haddam. So that's a nice little tidbit. Same thing, information for the airline local. I pretty much just use these the start times on my fast clock to determine, when the locals are going to start during an operating session. Shoreline locals, again, the same sort of detail. Now, in addition to the prototype information, one of the priceless resources, if you actually have the opportunity, or if anybody's still around for the era that you model, to have some, firsthand accounts of for how your particular railroad in the Shoreliner magazine, which is published by the New Haven Railroad Historical and Technical Association. It's a day in the life of the local freight by a guy named John Wallace, who's been a tremendous resource of information for me on this railroad. And fortunately, he's still with us, so he can critique my operations a little bit and track arrangements and such on the line. If you saw my modeling clinic, you know a little bit more about that backstory. So the Valley Local operates from Hartford, which on my railroad is staging down to Middletown, and then depending on the day, either East Haddam or East Berlin. You may have noticed on the schedules previously that you go to the Valley Local goes to East Haddam on alternate days, and then it goes to East Berlin on the days that it doesn't go to East Haddam. The Airline Local goes from staging in Cedar Hill Yard in New Haven up to Middletown, and that's as far as I've modeled it, which you'll see later. Haddam Local goes from New London, which is east of Old Saybrook on the shoreline, goes through Old Saybrook and then up to East Haddam and then continues on to Cedar Hill Yard. The other shoreline local originates in Cedar Hill and heads over to Old Saybrook, interchanges with the Haddam Local and swaps cars in Old Saybrook and then continues on to New London. So those were the main characters. Here are the supporting actors in our play. We've got the mainline through trains. There are 71 trains that go through Old Saybrook during a typical day in the autumn of 1948. But I only model about 30 of them. I get the Yankee Clipper, which is one of the most famous trains for the New Haven. Old Saybrook was positioned within just a few miles of being exactly equidistant between New York and Boston. So all the big name trains like the Yankee Clipper, like the Merchants Limited, that left their respective terminals in Boston and New York at the same time. The Senator and the Colonial, which were joint service trains with the Pennsylvania Railroad that came up from Washington, D.C. to head to Boston, get the Bostonian. Symbol freights at night. The passenger service operated very heavily during the day, especially in my era. So a lot of the freight operated at night. But even still, there are 7 symbol freights between New York and Boston that come through Old Saybrook during the daytime hours. Now, as you'll see as we go along, the only way I can model all this traffic in the space and with the track that I have is to have contrived some way of reusing equipment. So the Yankee Clipper and the Merchants, they have all parlor cars just like the prototype, but a lot of these other name trains, I have the consist books. I could model the consist, but there's no way I could operate them. I just don't have that much staging tracks. But if any of you guys come over to operate on my railroad and you've modeled the name trains with accurate consists, bring them over and I'll be sure and operate them. So here's a typical day on the main line on Old Saybrook, and that is just from 12:10 to 4:17 in the afternoon. There's 71 trains in a 24-hour period. There's 23 through freights, 48 passenger trains. Now, when the locals are in town, again, it's the eastbound and westbound shoreline locals. They meet in Old Saybrook to swap cars. They tended to meet in Old Saybrook around midday. So even when they're in town, there's still 11 trains from 12:10 p.m. to 4:17 p.m. And that's in addition to the locals. That includes 9 different name trains, a through freight. So how do I do all this? Well, thanks to Bill Chapin, I actually discovered that I could run around 30 trains prototypically. So this is basically what we did. I looked at the schedules, all that prototype information that we went through before. I really, really wish I had a station register sheet. I don't. I haven't been able to discover one yet for Old Saybrook. I haven't been able to discover one for any town yet on my line. But so I had to basically come up with the schedule for the day by cobbling together all the different resources from the employee timetable, the freight symbol book, and then try and come up with a typical 13-hour day from 7:38 a.m. to 8:40 p.m. There's 7 through freights during that period. There's 28 passenger trains during that period, including some of the name trains that I mentioned before and a Railway Express agency train. Now, the key here is if you look on the right, all those times in the far left column are actual times taken from the prototype timetables. Those are the actual train numbers. Those are the actual names of the trains when they're named. But look at the directions. They tend to alternate eastbound and westbound. Now, luckily, that allows trains to be operated from staging at each end. If you're not going to be hung up on specific consists for your passenger trains, and you're willing to reuse equipment, which I totally am, because these are just supposed to be the supporting actors, then you can operate all these trains from each end. Now, we've noted the impressive number of trains, but that doesn't really readily translate to a model railroad. So here's how we developed the operating. Realized the potential for operating the prototype trains on a prototype schedule through just one prototype town. Now that's the key. I don't have to war line on just Old Saybrook. So it's just trains running through town. Now, here's the worksheet. The occupancies on different staging tracks. I don't know if you can really see it on your screen. Hopefully you can. But if you look at you've got 7 tracks in New London staging. You just have 4 staging tracks in Cedar Hill. And these are all occupancies and times for each of the staging tracks. So we could figure out, when a staging track could be vacated so that there would be room for another train to pull in. Actually, it looks pretty complicated, but once you figure out it's alternating eastbound and westbound, it works. And the other key thing is that, as you'll see in the track plan later, there's reversing loops at each end. So I can actually use the loops for staging as well. That all got distilled into what I call my Old Saybrook train register. So we won't go down the rabbit hole on this. This could be a whole clinic in itself of just how you can get this kind of traffic density on with very little staging. But this is developed and evolved over the course of many operating sessions with lots of help and feedback from Randy Hamill, who you may have seen his clinic. Just a brief overview, you've got New London on the left, Old Saybrook's in the center, Cedar Hill's on the right. And so you've got trains, as you'll see later on, a 4-to-1 fast clock. So that gives the shoreline operators an idea of how many real actual minutes they have in between trains that they need to do with each of the trains. Screen. Here's the track plan. Thank you so much to Ian Thorpe for this track plan. He contacted me from Sydney, Australia. Every once in a while, you'll get something like that. Somebody from Brook Junction, where the A is, that's where you can see where New London continues. So this is, how I included all this operation in my basement. It helps to have, a good amount of space and an understanding wife. I ended up punching, as you can probably tell, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different holes through walls. But I basically built the layout in 3 sections. I'd started off with these 2 modules here, and that's all I was going to have for the longest time. But of course, once I decided to model the valley line, then I figured those modules could be stand-ins for the airline. And then I bumped into this room and got the whole valley line. So I got from Hartford down through Wethersfield, Rocky Hill, Dividend, Cromwell, down to Middletown. But of course, then I wanted a little bit of the shoreline, so I cut a huge proscenium into the wall at the bottom of the basement stairs. Included Saybrook Junction, enough room for the Saybrook scene there. And then you'll see the loops at each end that I have to help me get the density of traffic that I need. And you can see, if you look a little bit up where the word Somerset is vertical there, that's the New Haven staging is in a covered. I took off from operating for a couple months, and actually it was more than a couple months, 15 months, and built downtown. So now I have the entire operation. So this is how it all comes together in a typical operating session. You got your mainline trains, operate, as I said before, according to the prototype employee timetable. Every single train during the period of time that I operate, from about 8:36 in the morning to, well, basically whenever the Valley Local is done at the end of the session, whatever time that ends up being. And we operate to the prototype times on a 4-to-1 fast clock. The movements through Old Saybrook are governed by a tower operator. Eventually, I'm going to have signaling. I don't have that yet. The trains run back and forth between west and south through New York and New Haven, to the east and north, New London and Boston. Then you got the local trains. They operate according to train orders that are issued by the agent, the dispatcher. Because they're on the main line, they're governed by the tower. So talk about contrast. If you are on the Haddam local, you are on the local freight that has a bit of the shoreline, because you're on the shoreline from New London to Old Saybrook, and you've got all the stress of having to stay out of the way of all these trains. But then once you're off the shoreline, you're up on the branch all by your lonesome. So it's a whole different feel. Typical session lasts about 3 actual hours, and if we got a full crew, we'll operate all 4 local freights and then 33 trains on the shoreline. We'll just go through these real quick because we've already talked about a bunch of this, but these are the different jobs that are available. One of the cool things about my layout is that it is scalable. I could just run 1 local, but I could accommodate up to 12 crew members. Well, that does get a little bit crowded with 2-man crews. PDX1, that is the shortest job that goes, from, as I said, from New Haven, switches Old Saybrook, then ends up in New London. It's a good introductory job for folks. PDX2 goes from New London through Old Saybrook, up the branch to East Haddam, back down to Old Saybrook, and then on to New Haven and Cedar Hill. The airline local goes from staging over the modules to Middletown and return. And the Valley local, the star of the show, goes from Hartford down to Middletown, and then depending on the day, it either continues south to East Haddam to swap cars with the Haddam local, or it goes up another branch up to East Berlin, depending on the day. It's always the longest job. Then you got an agent operator, sits at the desk, he issues the paperwork, mans the tower, acts as is basically turnout indication for all the tortoise switch machines. All the mainline switches are operated from this point with tortoises. All the turnouts on the branch lines are all manually operated. Agent completes a list for each town. Tower operator, sometimes it's the same guy, controls all the movements on the main and Old Saybrook. So then before the session, this is just a quick overview of the process. We'll go into it in a little bit more detail as we go along. There's a spreadsheet that I use to generate all the car movements, basically work orders from the consignees from the industries. I complete all the wheel reports and switch lists for each town. Then there's a job briefing where you review the bulletin order, get your paperwork and tools, and then you check with the agent in each town and receive additional switch lists along the way and additional orders if necessary. And then back in the old days, you'd actually come to the guy sitting at the desk, but that just got too congested. So now usually the switch list and additional paperwork are in the bill box at each town. We'll get into this in a little bit more detail as we go along. Before the cars actually are, this is all happening before the operating session. You just go and either enter an X if it's occupied or leave it blank if it's unoccupied. These are all the different car spots. Then once you run the spreadsheet generates the instructions of whether the car is to be picked up, if there's a delivery, whether there's a delivery and what type of car is being delivered to the particular spot. And then you have to build trains based on the cars that are in the deliver column. Depending on the road names that pop up on the cars, there'll be different routing instructions for those. And then create wheel report. One of those times where I'm not want to do car card and waybill. I know that's a very common operating system for model railroads. I'm trying to keep this as prototype and need something that will generate waybills randomly with some purpose so that I can get away from the spreadsheet. Reason being is because, as you'll see in a little bit, since I don't have waybills, I've come up with a contrived way to do that, to deal with that. Train order and switch list form. The wheel report is on a switch list form. It'll list all the cars in your train which have to be delivered to industries along your route. So at the start of the session, you're going to get your piece of paper that looks like this. It's going to have a list of all your cars that are in your train and what to do with each of those cars. Then the switch lists, again, the same form, but they're going to be in each town along the way. And the switch list in each town tells you what to do, if anything, with any of the freight cars. Now, here's where having waybills would really be helpful, because some of the cars, just like on the prototype, some of the cars need to be transferred from one local to another to get to their ultimate destination. So because I don't have waybills, I created this car transfer form where you basically the crew has to transfer the information from the switch list that's related to the car that has to be transferred. They put that information on this form, and then when they leave the car, they leave this form where they leave the car. And that's because I don't have waybills. So the session starts. So that's all before the operating session. Whenever I send out an email to my operators, I call it a crew call. I did a post on this on my blog. It's I call it an invitation and added realism. So it's an invite to the operators, but instead of just being an email, it's done in the form of a memorandum to crews on the railroad, and it also tells you everything that's happening that day in history of the day that you're operating. So if it's October 3rd, 1948, I've got information on this in this email about what was going on in the world, what was going on in politics, what was the most popular song of the day, what was the most popular movie that was out, that sort of thing. Then when you come and report for duty, you got to sign the crew register and pick up your tools. That's the crew register there at the bottom of the stairs. Those are all the tools. I provide tool aprons so you can hold stuff, pencils, uncoupling picks. There's a job briefing. This is all pretty standard stuff for those of you that conduct operating sessions. Tell people where the bathrooms are, where the exits are. Review the bulletin order and go over operating protocols, especially for newbies. This is a good introduction to the layout. The bulletin order will always tell you specific things that you need to be aware of, like where lift outs are, that sort of thing, what to be aware of, speed restrictions, that sort of thing. So here we are reviewing some of the paperwork. Now you pick up your paperwork, and this is all on a clipboard for you at the start of the session. I've got conductor's notes card. Basically, the idea here is that even if you haven't operated on my railroad before, like on the prototype, you would have to be qualified over the line and know everything about that line before you were allowed to go on your own. But this way, an old head conductor there with you. So it basically tells you everything that train does, gives you some pro tips for what to do. On one of the locals, if you didn't know better, you would try and switch each town along the way, but that's pretty hard because to make sure you go to the end of the line and work your way back. That's for the whoever's going to be acting as conductor. For whoever's the engineer. Now with sound decoders, there's a lot more for the engineer to do. So you get an engineer's card, tells you what locomotive you've got and what the different function keys, what different functions those keys operate. And then the more prototypical stuff, you get your clearance card, which gives you authority to move your train out of the yard. And then your train orders, which tell you what authority you have along the line between 2 points between which to operate your train. And then you, of course, get your wheel report. And your car transfer form. Again, once I can get rid of this car transfer form, you'll have a stack of waybills instead. So we usually start our sessions at 6:38, 69 moles, referred to their time to main track, so they don't go until they're told they can go. There's our towerman, Randy Hamill. It's Bill Schneider is our mainline mole over in New London staging. The Valley and Air locals basically depart whenever they're ready. They don't have to worry about the main line. They start in staging, so whenever they're ready to go, they can go as soon as they have their paperwork. So the Cedar Hill mole job on the shoreline. You can see the modules in the background there, and that's Essex to the right. So when you're operating your local, at each town, you sign the train register, recording the time and number of cars. I'm kind of getting away from this because it's just it's just extra paperwork, and since you don't really have to worry about other trains being on the branch, you're protecting it, not protecting against other trains. You don't really need to do this. I mean, you do it on the prototype, but it was just an extra thing that a lot of people would usually forget. But you do check the bill box at each town for any paperwork that's addressed to your train. That's especially important in the towns of East Haddam and Middletown, where paperwork in the bill box could be addressed to either you or another crew. So be sure you're only picking up the stuff that's addressed to you, whether they're train orders or switch lists or car transfer forms. So these are, that's the train register on the clipboard. There's one of the bill boxes there in Old Saybrook. And then above all, I mean, it's a lot of paper, but the main reason we're doing this is to have fun. It's to create the time machine to go back in time and learn how these things operate, get a little taste of the railroad in true prototype operations. But if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. See, these guys are having fun, right? Okay, these guys are having a little bit more fun. So that's pretty much it. If you need or want more information, I've got a ton of information on the website. The website is where I archive the most important stuff, the stuff that I really want to save for whatever posterity reason there is to save it. The blog is a little more timely. I've got things posting to the blog on a fairly regular basis. And then the Facebook group is pretty much, grab shots, whatever's going on a particular day. But if you want more information about operations, you'll want to go to the website, because there I've got a whole operations section with, prototype info, all modeling ideas and how to do operations paperwork, different jobs that there are available, what you might want to consider when you're setting up operations. And then this Valley Line crew info section is basically anybody that is coming to the layout for the first time to operate, or anybody that needs a refresher. They can go right to that this Valley Line crew info section and get all the stuff ahead of time that they will see and receive during the session itself. It's really helpful whenever we have big conventions I live about, sometimes coming to the layout for the first time, so they'll get a heads up on what all's involved with that. And then the most recent addition, as I've mentioned a couple times, is there's a Valley Local group on Facebook. I know a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with Facebook. It's, for railroad stuff, it's a great and easy way to just post things quickly. I can get feedback more quickly there too. So pretty much anywhere you want to access the information here, there's a way to do that. And if you haven't had enough today, if you want to follow one of the local freights step by step, there's actually a way to do that. You go to the operations section of the website. I just this past week posted a 3-part series of posts I did on the blog of how to do a day on PDX2. That's the Haddam local that has a little bit of everything. It has the shoreline, some shoreline operations in Old Saybrook, and it goes up the branch line, interchanges, but hopefully enough so you get an idea of what all is involved. And that's a lot of talking. It's probably a fire hose of information, but thankfully these things are recorded, and you can refer to them if you want some more torture, if you want some more information. Reach out to me if you want to email me, through the email or on the blog, the Facebook, whatever. I'm very accessible. I really love learning as much as I can about prototype operations. I'm really receptive to different ways of doing things, and really enjoy the feedback and the input. Anything that you have as far as constructive criticism or anything else or feedback is always super appreciated. And I really thank you guys for your time. So that's all there is to that. So the minimum is 1. And the reason I say that is because you can have just one local operate, and I've done that before, and I'm doing that a little bit more now during these times. And so yeah, you could do it with just one. Just operate one of the locals. You can operate them in succession. But for a full session, when you really want to do everything, it takes a minimum of about 8 people. So you've got, crew. You got to crew 4 locals, so that's at least 4 people. Then you've got tower operator, that's 5. And then you've got your shoreline mold.
How many people can you fit in there for like the maximum number?
Well, I've had, I think my record is 13 choke points where it gets down to 24 inches. But they, they tend to widen right back out. But that's a lot. I had 13 people, and it ended up, I think a couple of the people, it was just a little bit too crowded. So a couple of people ended up just rail fanning or hanging out on the bleacher seats. The bleacher seats are the basement stairs, which is actually little insight. If you come over to the layout and you don't really want to operate, but you want to watch and stay out of the way, sit on the basement stairs. You'll see everything going on. You get a bird's eye view of Old Saybrook. You can just watch the trains go by. It's actually a really cool spot, and I usually sit there myself when I'm not operating.
How about a time-lapse camera right there so we could watch from home?
You know something, that is an excellent idea. I've been inspired by Dave Aberlease in his Onondaga Cutoff. I've been kind of toying around with the idea of maybe doing something like that, having just a train cam in Old Saybrook, especially once Saybrook gets fully scenic with the backdrop and everything. If I can get an unobtrusive camera set there trackside, it actually would be pretty cool.
So how big is the local staff? Is there people that you need that operate there often that you would need for a 13-person operating station?
So the core crew that I've got is about 6 to 8 people. We got Randy Hamill, as I mentioned before, Bill Schneider, Tom Durr, my core guy. But because I have operated here quite often, they'll happily, take a step back if I've got guests or other people coming. So, but yeah, I do have a really good core crew, and so I never have had any trouble filling out an op session. Well, typically about 3 hours, 3 real hours, and that is all dependent on how quick the pretty much run out the clock in a lot of respects. As far as prototype time goes, one of the drawbacks usually by that time, the staging in Cedar Hill.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. as it is, if you look at the track that's hung off the front of the Somerset module, and it takes 9 inches out of what used to be a fairly generous. That's where the mission creep really has to stop. I mean, I got to keep priorities straight and realize, okay, the shoreline trains are great, but they're really only the supporting actors. So so I'm not going to reduce aisle size for that.
So is your box permanently there, or do you swap it out with another box?
Good question. It is permanent. What I have as far as swapping out stuff is I have roll around carts. You may have seen them at Michael's or Walmart. They're little roll around carts that are about 4 feet high and have all drawers. That's where I store my my rolling stock, and I can swap cars in and out from those drawers. But the staging box in for Cedar Hill is totally permanently attached. It's not going anywhere.
So someone asked, with so many people coming from out of town, how do you handle the different levels of operating skills and doing the jobs?
Excellent question. It's not easy. There's, as the questioner points out, there's a wide variety of experience among operators. That the locals that I have, as eastbound shoreline local, all it does is go. So there's a variety of levels of complexity for each of the locals. So I'll try and do my best to yeah, absolutely. So especially on the Valley local, that side of the layout has the most generous aisles, has the most real estate if needed. But yeah, typically 2-man crews are great. I have been whittling down a little bit on the a couple of the other locals that are in the other room where things are a little more snug, and getting down to 1-man crews there just because it's a little less crowded.
You mentioned a fast lock. Do you operate anything other than 4-to-1?
I haven't. 4-to-1 works out really well. That would really, between each train, that would have to all be adjusted. Now, I think actually, now that you mention it, I think that's the times in that column are actually derived from a formula. So, I might want to try that. There's a formula hour session for a 12-hour prototype.
You willing to tell us what kind of fast clock it is and where we can get one?
Oh, funny story, but I'm trying to remember the brand, but it's compatible with NCE. I can't remember the brand, but if you Google, it's just a digital fast clock. Some folks have the fancy analog looking clocks that actually keep fast time, but this is just a digital one, and I'm really blanking on the manufacturer, but it's easily Googleable. If you contact me, I'll if somebody's interested in that, I can forward you the information then. The funny part of the story, a lockdown or a terrorist attack or anything like that. I work at the Connecticut legislature, and my wife had this sent to work. So I wouldn't see it show up at home. And of course, they're doing all the scanning, and it's like, what's this digital clock, and what's the wires, and what's in this box? The fact is actually stranger than fiction there. But yeah, pro tip.
Ouch. Would you do it different if you had to do it again?
Yeah, another excellent question. Short answer is, if I could do it differently, I would definitely avoid duck unders. The problem is that especially because Saybrook is 3 points off of a Y, east, west, and north, there's staging over. But the duck unders aren't that bad because they're only in place when the train has to go over them, and then once they're over the lift out and on their way up the branch, the lift out comes out. So it's not that big of a deal as long as we remember to take it out and put it back in when the train is coming back south. One level, it's all railroad in the showdown, but that's the only grid on the railroad. Moguls, brass steamers to run prototypically linked local freights, which on the Valley line, the prototype operated anywhere from 12 to 30 cars. My typical Valley line local is anywhere from 10 to 14 cars, and all hauled by one of those little moguls. So having level layout really helps a lot.
Does the shoreline segment include Rocky Neck?
No, it only includes Old Saybrook, and yeah, and frankly, that's the only way I can get the density of traffic to work on the prototype timetable is customers along the way in the intermediate towns between New Haven and New London, but you got to draw the line somewhere.
Indeed. Would you be willing to share your spreadsheet with people?
Short answer is I think so, but it isn't. It's become mine over time because of the evolution of it. But I really need to give credit to Mike Rosenberg, who actually lives up the line here. He had first posted this spreadsheet on the Model Railroad Hobbyist website some years ago, and he and I have developed it over time. So I could certainly point people to that spreadsheet. As far as the one that's further developed, I'd want to ask him first, but I don't think he'll have any problems. So yeah, contact me, and I don't know if it'll be useful for you, but at least give you an idea of how I generate the car movements, at least until I get Waybells.
Do you get your crews to complete status reports so they can tell you where there were problems, bad order, track problems?
Excellent question, and a resounding yes. As a matter of fact, especially early on in the operations, that was one of the primary reasons for me to do operating sessions. They're going to be the ones that know what's where. People can point out what happened, what went wrong. There's actually a piece of paper on your clipboard where you can note all that stuff. And I ask people at the beginning of the session to note things before they forget, so that I have a punch list for next time.
Since we're a little over time, I'll ask one last question. Is your background in railroad operations?
Oh, is my background in railroad operations?
Yes.
Or no, actually, I'm an attorney. So, but I do have to say, but I do know a bit about railroad rules. I've taken the NORAC test, and I really enjoy that aspect of the hobby, as you could probably tell.
I think that question was kind of saying how awesome this clinic was. or how good you are at presenting it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm, as I said at the beginning, I'm willing to learn more, and I'm anxious to hear if anybody has a better way of doing things, a more prototypical way of doing things. Just contact me. And thank you guys again so much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, we're still here. We're got a bit of a community announcement to make, I believe, Speed.
Swapping of the crew?
It's the swapping of the crew time. So I think for another hour or so, being it's now 3 a.m. in Australia, we're now well and truly into Sunday, so it's Sunday morning here. Brad will be coming on to take over from me, but that's at the end of the next hour. We've got a new presenter coming in. But more importantly, for everybody out there in the stream, we have to restart the stream. Every 5 or 6 hours, we've got to restart the stream because the Facebook and YouTube hierarchy don't like us going longer than about 5 or 6 hours. So, who out there just heard that message? Type 66 into the chat if you heard that message.
And as you guys
haven't seen the chat, we'll cut now to the ad slide, and then we'll be back in probably about 3 or 4 minutes by the time we reload it. So refresh your YouTube screen and refresh your Facebook, and you will see the new stream come up, and it'll be labeled Part 2. So we shall see you in a little while.